or is there something bigger lurking beneath the surface? And we got a lot of good answers today, and I think we're going to be okay. So we're excited about that. And what do you guys got going on your program today? That's what I was.
So yeah, for the next 3 hours, we've got a pretty stacked little lineup. I'm about to bring up Eric Yakes to the stage. Eric is founder of Epoch or Epic Ventures. Still not sure how exactly he wants to pronounce it. Really depends. Depends where you're from, I think. But we've got him. Then we've got Peter Dunworth coming in for the middle part, followed up to close things out with Nico Moran, the legendary host of Simply Bitcoin. I'm sure we will get into all of these topics and more. There's a lot going on right now. And I think for me, the biggest thing that I'm looking at is with all of this bearishness, these bearish vibes that I'm seeing, to me, this just feels like a great opportunity. It feels like when everybody else is bearish, I get a little bit more bullish. When I start to get worried is when everybody has the same consensus that we're going higher, we're going higher, we're going higher. But when everybody's kind of licking their wounds and people are getting liquidated, that's when I'm like, okay, let's sell my other kidney. I don't think I need both of them or any of them at all. And let's see what we can do here to try and stack some more sats. But Hank, appreciate you very much, man. Folks should tune into your show every day of the week. It's a great one. If you want to stay up to date on all things Bitcoin and whatever else is happening in the world. I'm going to bring up Eric now to the stage, and Hank, I'm going to kick you off. So you have a great rest of your day, man.
You're much better guest than me. Get out of here, give it my best. Have a good 3 hours.
Sounds good, Hank. Take care. And now we're going to go ahead and bring up Eric Yakes to the stage. Eric, how you doing, man? You're the first person who's come on this show with a broccoli haircut. It is great to have you here. What's new, brother?
That's funny. A girl asked me recently if I was a food, what food would I be? And that was my response, that I would be broccoli.
How could you not be? I mean, maybe cauliflower, but I don't know if you're not quite white enough to be.
I'm a broccoli. I'm more of like, more lively, more green on the inside. I'm definitely a broccoli guy.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm doing good. I'm excited to podcast with you. And I'm extremely bullish, and you kind of took the words from my mouth of what's going on right now.
You want to maybe let everyone know. By the way, do you, for the purposes of your venture fund, do you pronounce it Epic or
Epoch? Epoch, and that won't be a question in another few years. People are going to remember the name. They better. There's a British pronunciation, and that's Epoch, and then the Western pronunciation in the U.S. is Epic. Got to go British. Got to go full Satoshi with it.
Got to go British. Absolutely. Okay. So let's talk about what's happening right now in the markets. I was live streaming last night because as Bitcoin was crashing, I was like, what do the people need? They need another live stream. Right. And I was looking at this. I think we got down to 89,400, something like that. I had a limit order hit at like 89,999, which is how I knew Bitcoin was dipping. So I was like, sweet boy, wish I would have, not made all those buys in between, higher, but hey, like, that's what happens with DCA, right? It all averages out in the end.
What it is.
But okay, what are you seeing right now? Because it seems to me like the gold bugs are out in force, gloating, dancing on Bitcoin's grave. The crypto, the crypto bros have been totally liquidated. They're out. They're just like, I'm done with all of this. The Zcash shills are just pumping up this thing very inorganically. And meanwhile, you've got fiat economists coming out of the woodwork to, again, dunk on Bitcoin, the Steve Hankes of the world. So you've got the Steve Hankes and the Peter Schiffs of the world, all basically taking a victory lap about Bitcoin's death. Meanwhile, I don't know about you, but I'm just really bullish. How are you feeling?
Yeah, man. I'm so the most bullish thing I think that's happened on my end in the past 24 hours is that I got a text from my mom last night, and she was like, is it time to buy now? And every time my mom starts getting excited about buying, it's like, it's always the bottom. Last cycle, my mom clipped like 15.6 or something.
Wow.
It was wild. Yeah.
Wow.
And so every time I see that, I get shivers, and I'm kind of like, okay, now we got to be getting in. Look, it's, you said it at the beginning of the show, it's a massive opportunity right now. With the way that, with me being an adventure fund, right? Like, I don't spend time thinking about where Bitcoin is going to be in the next 3 months. And there's a lot of like smart people who can provide like directional bets and help you kind of get comfortable at least with what's happening around all that. What gets me excited about what's happening right now is that we have this asset that's, crashing down below 2 trillion market cap or whatever it's at right now. And we're talking about an asset where it's addressing the largest market of the world. and it's done that over the past year, better than anything else in terms of the growth, or I guess over the past 2 years. And when we look at like the fundamental problems, we look at like the reasons why people are concerned with Bitcoin. None of these problems are things that aren't being solved every single day. And that's really like the number one factor that I'm most bullish about. So like, what does that mean? Like when we're looking at things, we're like, okay, so here's what's going to make like normal people who start freaking out when they see certain random news change their mind. And that's once Bitcoin does get more of these gold-like dynamics. Like once it has more of a negative or inverse correlation towards broader markets, a lot of the general population is going to start using it more as a hedge for those types of reasons. The gold bugs are going to stop dancing on our graves every single time there is a price crash. Now, there's arguments as to how Bitcoin's a bit more lagging in a lot of these, and we can go into all of that. But like really the point is that like what's going to make that happen is fundamentally just the volatility of Bitcoin's price relative to other currency or other assets within the next year or so, or 2 years or 3 years. As that starts to decline or continues to decline, then that's really what starts to create that more like inverse relationship over time. I think that like that is how I view Bitcoin in the next like 5 to 10 years, is that like volatility is just going to keep dropping, and it's going to start getting more of that inversion. It's going to stop. It's going to continue to like not follow risk markets as much as it has historically. And then when I think about it, so, okay, but that hasn't happened yet. So what's happening right now? Well, it is following risk markets. We've had a bit of a sell-off in the market. A lot of the risks that we've seen overhanging broader markets has been relieved. The government in the US is back up and running, And
unfortunately,
unfortunately,
I was hoping they'd stay locked down just indefinitely,
Right. You never know.
Get them next time.
Yeah. Next one. And with this government shutdown, like coming back online, and then we're starting to see a reversal in liquidity that's going to be provided back into the system. So like, what do I see next year? We're going to have a lot more liquidity. Risk markets are going to keep going up. Bitcoin is going to keep going up more than the rest of the risk markets. And right now is just like an awesome little blip where we get a buy and just clip another 30% upside on whatever buying that I didn't expect we otherwise would. So that's good. But like really over the long term, all I'm focused on is like, is it getting bigger? Is volatility declining? And are people starting to use this as something that's going to hedge more against broader markets? But I mean, in the long term, then we start getting into, and some people think this might happen earlier. And I'm not a macro bro. I don't spend a ton of time on it, but like of the macro bro community, I think that, the Weimar Germany gold's fluctuations as it was appreciating over time could get a lot more significant. And it's certainly a risk. I don't think that, Bitcoin's being perceived in the same manner as that right now. So like, that's why I don't expect it in the near term. I think that reality is going to come into play, but I think it could be much longer, and that central bank liquidity can expand more and things can get more out of hand. And, I view that in like a 5 to 10 year type time horizon before those types of swings start happening in the market.
Well, it is really interesting because during the Biden administration, for all of Sleepy Joe's faults, and not that he even had anything to do with this, because I don't think he even knew where he was or what he was doing at that time, at least in the US, the M2 money supply contracted, right? We did have a substantial tightening. The Fed raised rates at a historic pace.
Yep.
The money supply, M2 actually went down, like shockingly, took a pretty deep dip after running up an insane amount during Trump and the COVIDflation period. Bitcoin performed shockingly well as monetary conditions were tightening. Now we've started to see the Fed loosening things up, and I don't like to hang on the Fed's every word with these things, because they are just a cabal of central banker bureaucrats basically get to decide the price of money. Not a huge fan of that, but what they do does matter in the fiat world, right? It does matter in terms of how much juice is flowing into this global bucket of liquidity. And so it's going to be interesting to me. It feels like we're just at this weird in-between period where people, again, sentiment is weird. People are really bearish. We're seeing, Bitcoin went, we'll never see Bitcoin below 100,000 again. And Bitcoin went down into the high 80s. So people are feeling weird. If you bought at the top for like your first buy ever, that's a bit gut wrenching, but like get used to it. This is Bitcoin. Like like the 69K down to 16K, that was gut wrenching. But if you followed, the Mrs. Yakes, indicator, you would have bought at 15.6 and been very, very happy with this ride up that we've had. But what I'm wondering is, like, are people just getting kind of complacent right now? Are people just getting a little bit bored because we've had so much sideways chop for so long? And, it's been kind of like boring, like we're lower than when Trump was inaugurated, right? And I think that's just messing with people's heads a little. And they're forgetting that, look, there's 21 million Bitcoin. There's literally infinite fiat, not just infinite dollars, but there's infinite Turkish lira and Argentinian pesos and rubles and everything. There's infinite fiat. It is chasing a completely finite number of Bitcoin. And it seems like people kind of forget that and get really focused on the near term, when the reality is that this thing, Bitcoin, might just rip our faces off at any moment. That's kind of what it feels like to me right now. I don't know if you have that same general vibe.
Totally. Yeah. I'm just like waiting for it to like cook upward at some point next year. What I think's happening is that I think that there's kind of like two different visions of the world that are kind of conflating in the market right now. And people are trying to decide what they believe. I think people are confused this cycle. Everybody's like, is this a 4-year cycle for Bitcoin anymore? Is this no longer true? Some people are like in shock in the same way some people were in shock when like the stock to flow model broke. And there's all these kind of like arbitrary ways that we try to look at the idea of price expectations, because like the only truth we know is that like an observable price is where the marginal demand meets the marginal supply. And there's a variety of different factors impacting that at any point in time. And prices are just simply something we observe, not something that we try to, create. And we're inevitably just going to be wrong about that. And like everybody tries to create these arbitrary models for everything. And sometimes they work for long periods of time. Sometimes they don't. I mean, even when you think about my background's been in finance for a long time. And, I'm a CFA. I've studied every last type of model. My specialty has been in valuation. And I think that, in finance, even like the most fundamental models of what the value of companies are, like these are all broken today. It doesn't mean that there isn't like truth to them, but they are all broken. And there's a famous economist, Nobel Prize winning economist, Robert Shiller, who wrote a book called Narrative Economics. And that's really trying to define like, how do markets even work today? And I think the reality is that there was a point in time, when money was a measuring stick tied to a finite, scarce commodity, that, markets did function like this. When modern portfolio theory and all these things that people in finance believe, this was all made during the 80s. And this was all, kind of based on a history of information and data that was, pre-1971. And when Harry Markowitz created modern portfolio theory, it's based on a lot of these beliefs. And then all of a sudden our measuring stick started to expand and expand and expand. And now markets are getting distorted and behave in a very different way. And then you have like Nobel Prize winning economists saying like, well, narratives is like how things work nowadays. And like crypto is kind of the epitome of that. Like what's happening with Zcash is certainly that. And what's happened with GameStop historically. And when we do see liquidity into the market, they're not trading on these fundamental models that we believed in. So like these fundamental models, like a discounted cash flow analysis, or like a, transaction multiples, price to earnings multiples, all these different things people look at to try to say, how do I take a, guess at what something should be valued? Fundamentally, those things have departed from reality. And there's a lot of investors nowadays that are kind of based in the value investment community that is, built around the idea of trying to adhere to these types of models of valuation. There's a lot of people like that today who are like quitting. They're like, we just, it's been decades. We can't compete in this central bank driven market. We don't really know. Once it goes on long enough and we're wrong, maybe I can last 1 decade saying like, no, eventually prices will revert to the reality I expect. But then 2 decades go by and your investors are saying, where are my returns? I just watched Tesla do this. And I just watched all these tech companies do this. When are you going to make me this type of money? And they've been saying, well, just give me some more time for a long time now. And we see that with like Michael Burry, who's closed his fund recently. And it's very hard for value investors. And like, that's the type of investing I was trained in. And I think I feel lucky I was exposed to Bitcoin because, I was early enough to catch it. So I didn't have to go through the same cognitive dissonance that I think so many other people from my background are currently going through. And so like, that's to like bring it all back. Everything's just kind of like departing from reality, and they're kind of, based in narrative right now. And when we think about these fundamental models for how this is all going to happen in the future, it's just, we don't know. All we know is like directional bets. And it does bring it back down to the simplicity of what you described of, this is a scarce commodity that you can send anywhere in the world to anybody that you want without asking anyone for permission. And it's the only thing in the world that we know is going to remain scarce. Like, buy that, and money's not going to stop getting printed. And that's certainly a directional bet you can make. And if you stop worrying about the next 3 months, then you're going to be just fine doing that.
Yeah. I mean, where I'm at right now is I'm looking at this sentiment and I'm thinking, man, I mean, I think your mom is clearly a very good indicator, right? Like she's been right before. I think she's right again this time. This feels to me like it did when Bitcoin was getting down to the bottom, like punching under 20K. I remember there was a while where we just kept hitting 19K, like over and over, just back and forth across 19K. And it was like, everyone's calling for Bitcoin to go to 12 or 10 or whatever. And Bitcoin hit 16. And then from there, it was steadily climbing up until basically, now, like it's basically what it did. Essentially just kept on laddering up. And this feels like one of those times where if I look now, that was, or even let's take another chunk of time frame. Let's look back at the COVID crash. We went down to, 3,500, 3,600, something like that, wick down, right?
Yeah,
that was just over 5 years ago that happened. Mm-hmm. Very different conditions, obviously, like much more panic, honestly. But let's compare that to now. You look back 5 years ago at that COVID crash and you say, that was a generational buying opportunity. Like, boy, I wish I would have backed up the truck. I wish I would have sold not just my kidneys, but my liver, my spleen, one lung at least, perhaps an arm and a leg. Like, you wish you had a couple of children, perhaps to send them to salt mines to start working. Nut. But exactly.
Right.
I feel like we're going to look back on this time, and I don't know if this is the bottom, right? Maybe we wick down to 58K. I have no idea. I don't have a crystal ball, but it feels like this general time right now is going to be looked back on. We go 5 years in the future, the same distance we are away from that COVID crash. This feels like one of those times where people are going to go, man, I should have backed up the truck. Like, totally. The writing was on the wall. I should have backed up the truck. I didn't do it. Shame on me. But that's the funny thing about human psychology, right? Nobody wants to buy when Bitcoin's at its most affordable. They want to buy when Bitcoin is at its, at its most expensive. And I guess that's one thing, maybe cycles change, liquidity changes, things change, but human nature doesn't change. And it's hard to fight against that. But those who do reap the rewards.
Yep. And I'm just remembering that I forgot to finish my point on the last one. But yeah, like that's kind of like what's happening in the market, right? Is I think what's happening right now is people are a bit confused, and everybody's asking the question, is Bitcoin going to continue to exhibit diminishing returns across these 4 cycles? Like, that's the big thing. I think when we're talking about these whales that are selling, I think that's what's going through their heads. I think a lot of them are like, I think Bitcoin is going to be in more of a diminishing returns camp. I've made exorbitant amount of money off of this. I'm going to start living my life much more. Because I think that if a lot of them believed it would be 10xing within the next, month, that they would probably still hold on to it. So it is kind of based on this difference in price expectations that I think some people are starting to develop right now. And, the way that we think about this internally at my firm is Bitcoin is exhibiting diminishing returns. We can witness that in the data. We can see that's happening over each cycle. But we kind of view 3 different phases of adoption for Bitcoin. And we think right now, Bitcoin's just being adopted as a store of value primarily. It exists as a medium of exchange and all these other things in other markets, and you can move across borders. But like the far and away, the primary use case of Bitcoin for most people today is just like storing value in it. And we think that that's got to get to a pretty large size. Like that's got to at least get close to like the market size of gold until we start to see Bitcoin being used more as like a medium of exchange. And I think that there's kind of like 3 curves that goes up for adoption. So it's like, I think that we're going to see diminishing returns. And we're witnessing that for periods of time, and then large inflection points as we get into new adoption cycles. So like for Bitcoin to get to the market of gold right now, we're talking somewhere around a 10x this cycle or a next cycle or whatever it is. And like getting another 10x out of Bitcoin is like, it's a very, very significant amount of value that's now flown into this asset. And then I think we get to another inflection point once people start actually using it more as money. People are wanting to do permissionless payments, and people are getting confidence of like, why don't I just hold all my savings in this thing and then just start paying for it with everything? And like that'll be like the inflection point when people start thinking from that perspective. And like right now, everybody's just at this might go to 200,000 to 300,000 over the next like 5 years. I might be able to get that from a bunch of other things as well. And people are starting to think about it in that perspective. And I think that'll exist for a period of time. And I think it'll also have very large run-ups as like the perspectives in the world changes or macro dynamics change. I mean, how all of these things end. Like Bitcoin is always and everywhere a massive rally away from some major headlines, some major macro development, something occurring out of nowhere that people didn't expect. The BlackRock announcement, however many years ago now, was that. And I remember kind of like tweeting about that in advance when I saw like that they were making certain investments around the industry. And I was like, oh, it looks like they're starting to set up and they're getting interested. And then it did like happen out of nowhere for people. And the way that the market responded, that was massive, and it drove an entire cycle. And then that something is going to happen, I think, with sovereign nations or governments. And when we look at the geopolitical situation in the world, we look at the current situation with reserves, we look at all the trends of government reserves and central bank reserves, how those are developing over time. And we are witnessing that people are starting to lean this direction. We are a significant conflict in the world away from many more people wanting to get on a permissionless asset. That could happen. That could happen in the very near to medium term. So there's just like when I think about like where could this like big run up again come from out of nowhere, and it's like, oh no, I don't want to be on the sideline when that happens. Right now, all over the world, there's a bunch of people in boardrooms. There's a bunch of governments having conversations, and they're all asking the question of what are we going to do with Bitcoin? What are we going to do with this asset? And that's like all the work that's happening under the iceberg is all existing around us right now. And it's happening in real time because Bitcoin's a part of the zeitgeist around the world. And then once you see the announcement, it's a product of years of deliberation amongst people, learning about it, accepting it, understanding it, and forming a strategy around it. And so that's what always makes me very comfortable, is when you understand the fundamentals and then you get more concerned of, oh, I hope I have some before one of these big conversations turns into reality and something that the public perceives. And that's why it's pretty awesome what's happening right now.
Well, it is interesting too. The old trope, the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed yet, is extremely, first of all, I don't remember who said that first, somebody much smarter than I am, but it's very true, because if you look around the world, you mentioned governments, central banks, corporate boardrooms, they're all figuring out, what do we do with this? Some of them already have the answer, right? You've seen the wave of Bitcoin treasury companies, MicroStrategy of which is obviously far and away, they're almost at 650,000 Bitcoin, which is an unfathomably large number.
So many Bitcoins.
It's just, it's wild. It's absolutely wild.
I can't even think about that.
And they just stacked another, I'm looking at this now, 8,178 Bitcoin, for a cool 835.6 million, Saylor DCAing in it, 102K average cost per Bitcoin. And but their cost basis is at, let's see, what is it? 74,000 approximately per Bitcoin. So, they're only in the black by a measly, 11, 12 billion, something like that, just chump change. But that's wild. At the same time, you had El Salvador, who just announced, and like, this is wild, President Nayib Bukele just announced that El Salvador had bought another 1,098.19, not sure why that exact number, Bitcoin, and bring their total holdings up to 7,474.37 Bitcoin. So their total amount that they own is still less than Strategy bought just in one purchase, which is wild. But they are a small nation that has, fixed their insane gang violence problem and is stacking Bitcoin as hard as they can. That is amazing. At the same time, you had the Czech National Bank, which this is like not numbers wise, but just more narrative wise is interesting. They said, okay, we're experimenting with, holding these digital assets, right? I think it was like Bitcoin and then like some sort of like stable coin type thing as well. So all these things are happening already. And it's a question of, okay, you see that, like if you're whether you're just a pleb who's thinking about, investing in Bitcoin, or you are another nation state, or you are a company, a publicly traded company or a private company that does not yet hold any Bitcoin, it's wild to me that if you're looking at this, you're not thinking, oh shit, what am I missing? Like I must be missing something, because this isn't just something you could ignore. And I think BlackRock was a huge, just because you brought that up, that was a huge inflection point already in just public perception, because it doesn't matter. The fundamentals of Bitcoin didn't change. But when Larry Fink said, yeah, Bitcoin good, that makes a lot of people say, okay, yep, Bitcoin good now. I like Bitcoin now. Like it moves the needle. And so again, it just feels like we're at this point. You mentioned also the medium of exchange takes a little while longer, right? We're seeing it as a store of value adoption first. I think that's natural. But again, future not evenly distributed yet. And it is used as medium of exchange in places where they have even worse fiat currencies than we do. Also, you've got Square, Jack Dorsey's Square, just enabling 4 million plus merchants to accept Bitcoin. So it's like all of these things happening at once. That's one of the other reasons I'm so bullish. It's like, the only thing that's not bullish right now is the price. But that just means that there's a huge disconnect. It feels like there's an information asymmetry right now. And if you're aware of it, if you're listening to this right now, you're one of the insiders. And it's like, you get to buy Bitcoin on sale, sats are on sale today. And everybody else is still just trying to play catch up or thinking it's a scam or stacking shiny hunks of metal that may just be tungsten. They don't know because they don't assay them themselves. Like it feels crazy that there's this disconnect, but there is.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. My firm, we do like an annual report on the Bitcoin ecosystem and everything happening in Bitcoin every year, and we're working on the one for 2025 right now. And this morning, I'm like sitting here, my analyst who sits right back there. I like turn around. I'm doing this section on like businesses and business models and all the things that have kind of happened this year as it relates to Bitcoin adoption by businesses and the different types of models. And I was like, this year was insane in terms of some of the adoption that's been brought about. I mean, the Square announcement is the most immediate, but I mean, going back to the beginning of the year with the repeal of SAB 121 and what we're going to start seeing with like Bitcoin Bank adoption. And then we think about how many neobanks are starting to incorporate the technology, and like Lightspark, they announced a partnership with SoFi. And they announced a partnership with Nubank, which is like the largest, South American neobank that exists. And like, there's just like there's so many things that we're like, I'm like thinking about, okay, what do we pick? Like there's so many things that happened this year where it's like I'm filtering out things just because we can't write about everything that last year would have been massive news. And like that's kind of that's like the key thing is the fundamentals in the background for like what we're doing is a venture capital fund, like looking at all these companies that are building things in the background. Like the fundamentals are great. There's so much adoption. People are understanding the use cases of Bitcoin more and more every day. And what's going to happen with like, this Square announcement. I did this tweet that like Jack Dorsey got really excited about because he was just like pumping everything about the Square announcement. But like I did this tweet just like making the point that I think so many businesses, so many banks are missing right now. And it's basically just like, okay, so we can use Bitcoin as a form of settlement that's better than settling in the banking system. Because today, if you want to do like an international payment and you have to wire it, then it has to go through a correspondent international banking system, which is, what we're calling the SWIFT network. And and that is just a bunch of banks messaging each other and saying, okay, well, I'm not connected to the bank he's sending it to, but I'm connected to you, and you're connected to another bank that's connected to the bank that eventually it's going to get to. And they have all these old systems that are all different and incompatible, and they have different data formats, and they have all these issues associated with it. And that's why wires suck, and it takes forever, and it's expensive. And everybody's like, okay, so Bitcoin's a lot better for that. And then stable coins came along, and people are like, oh, well, stable coins are actually better because then, we don't have to worry about the volatility of the asset. And like, stable coins are great. We've seen a ton of adoption with all these things that they've done. And I think that there's a lot more use cases that are going to come for them. But like the key thing, like the really, really big idea that Jack sees that a lot of these other businesses don't see, because Jack's thinking, a decade into the future right now. And there's a bunch of CEOs out there, like CEOs that are adopting stablecoins and prioritizing a lot of it. They're thinking in the next year, and that's fine. I don't blame them. There's a lot of reasons you think in the next year, but stablecoins are effectively still tethered to the banking system, because when you send a stablecoin to somebody, it's not final settlement of the asset. That stablecoin is backed by just like government debts that need to go be liquidated in the banking system and ultimately create a cash wire through the correspondent banking system back to your account to get final dollar settlement. And that's going to be like a really big problem that people run into for these companies over time. And what Jack realizes with Bitcoin payments and getting ahead of all this is that Bitcoin is native to the internet. It is not tethered to anything in the old system. And that distinction allows you to do so many more things with Bitcoin, that stablecoins are going to hit a ceiling eventually in their adoption because of it. And like, that's what's so huge, is with 50 million different customers now getting exposure to these Bitcoin payments. And they're going to realize how much better this settlement is. And it's going to get people on neutral native internet money, not tied to anything in the prior system. And that's like massive what's happening right now. We have a portfolio company that called Castle, and they're basically trying to do this for all the other payment providers payment software. So like today, it's like, Square is the majority of the market for merchants, but they're like a generalist platform. And there's some companies that don't use Square because they need purpose-built software, like a restaurant. All restaurants are using like Toast, for example. And this company Castle is trying to basically integrate with all the other types of software and provide that functionality for those companies as well, so that they can accept payments in Bitcoin and save in Bitcoin. And that's sweet, because if they're successful in that goal, then we're going to have a lot of different merchants getting onto Bitcoin over the next few years.
Yeah, I think that is such a fundamentally important thing, and one of the reasons I think like the work that Jack is doing through Block, through Square, through Cash App, it is so fundamentally important. And he sees the writing on the wall, because it's like, I was talking with Jeff Booth yesterday, and he calls stable coins guaranteed loss coins, right? And yes, they, especially for people in emerging markets, they are a heck of a lot better than holding whatever their local currency is, right? They're not as good as Bitcoin still, and are still permissioned at a different level, right? There's a ton of trade-offs there, but okay, that's, when you are used to dealing with a fiat currency that is absolutely abysmal, one that's like the prettiest horse at the glue factory, the skinniest kid at fat camp, that's still like a step up for you. But being able to actually use Bitcoin and actually have final settlement, and whether you're moving dollars over Bitcoin, over these Bitcoin rails, or moving sats, it's just a superior way to settle. And I think that's what Jack sees. That's what he's enabling, and he's just normalizing it. Like, it's not that anybody needs to do something new. It's just a little toggle that you just need to turn on. And so I think that's the beautiful thing. I want to get into a couple more topics. One of the things I want to get your thoughts on is Trump's stimmy talk coming up, and just kind of like what that means large. I don't know if you saw this headline that Trump was at a McDonald's conference. He's at a McDonald's conference talking about 50-year mortgages and $2,000 stimmy checks. And like I'm like, we're talking about this at a McDonald's conference. This is like, he's doing the meme somehow. Like there's a meme here, and I can't even handle it. We're going to go to a very quick commercial break. Then we're going to come right back with more Eric Yates from the Epoch from Epoch Ventures. Stay tuned. We will be right back, and we'll be talking about Donald Trump at a McDonald's conference, talking about issuing stimmy checks. What a world we live in. Stay tuned.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy. Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the centre of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're travelling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxum, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxum, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed two brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to Roxum TV. My name is Walker America. I am here with Eric Yakes. He is the founder of Epoch Ventures. We have been talking about what makes us very bullish right now. And one of the other things that makes me very bullish, in addition to all of the obviously bullish medium of exchange adoption that we're seeing on Bitcoin, and the fact that everybody else is super bearish, is the fact that we've got the president of the United States once again talking about stimmy checks. And this, I mean, this to me just seems like I've seen this movie before. Like somehow I know that Trump likes sending out stimmy checks. I mean, it feels like a bit of a democratic strategy at this point, but he was the one who was started to do it during COVID. So I guess that, the red or blue, you're still getting stimmies. It's just whether they're canceling, your student loans or just sending you direct cash. That's really the question. But I mean, do you think that, have we learned nothing, Eric? Have we learned nothing from what we saw last time around? Like there's that great website, like that shows you the percentage gain that you'd have if you just bought Bitcoin with your Stimmy check when they first came out, the $1,200 stimulus check during the early days of COVID. And it's like you're up some crazy percent, but it's, that $1,200 is worth like, I don't know, like I forget, at least 10, 15x, something ridiculous, right? And so it just feels like, again, like I'm just saying, if they send out Stimmy checks again, tariff stimmies or whatever they're going to be, I'm going to be throwing that directly into getting new sats. But I mean, is this just where we're at now? Like, no matter who's in power, they're just like, hey, how can we give you more free money so that you'll vote for us again? Or do you, I mean, I don't know how closely you're following all this tariff stuff. To me, it just seems like it's been a mess. I'm of the opinion that tariffs generally are a market distortion. And, perhaps that's too Austrian, reductionist of me. But do you look at this at all just for, the work that you do as your, with your venture fund, or is this kind of just like something you're like, yeah, whatever, politicians are going to do what they're going to do and they're always going to print more?
A bit of both. Yeah, politicians going to stimmy. That's kind of like the new world we in. This is kind of like the proto version of I think the inevitability of UBI getting proposed under further regimes going forward. And but until we get to that point, I think that with everything that's happened, well, one, I'm putting my Stimmy directly into Bitcoin. That's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see the returns I'm going to get. Like, my Stimmy check is going to pay for probably all of my kids' education who I have not created yet. Like, that's cool. That's pretty sweet to think about. So I'm fine with us stimmying it up. It's better than it going to the banks if we're going to create the money. It's kind of like the lesser of two evils, I guess, is the way you could view it. Like, to your point about, what do I think about tariffs? Like, 100% agree. Market distortion. Government should, in theory, if capital could move across borders in a more efficient economy, then we'd have a greater allocation of capital and ultimately labor. And the more that we could bring these things down, the better. But the problem is like, countries all get put into a prisoner's dilemma, right? And then they have to make decisions. So like, what's Trump doing? He's getting bargaining power from nothing, not nothing at the cost of the domestic population. He's gaining bargaining power, and that's really what the strategy focuses around. So it's kind of hard because a lot of the outcomes are somewhat intangible and longer term that could emerge from it. But it's not something I spend a ton of time on. It's just something that I think as it relates to our businesses, we consider when it comes to more like industrial type businesses with manufacturing and how that can impact their supply chains over time. Like, once again, going back to the pandemic, when we saw distortions in supply chains and the central bankers, and, there was a whole macro community at that time that was blaming those supply disruptions on all of inflation. And that, that emerged to be pretty patently incorrect over the long term. And Jerome Powell had to eventually say, okay, these things aren't going away, and we just actually created a bunch of inflation, and this was monetary creation. So I think that I think the big thing that we learned during that big disruption from like a business model standpoint was everybody said, it was a lot of like, with the Japanese kind of creating in supply chains and like being like the first to really trailblaze the idea of just-in-time inventory management and creating these like very hyper lean supply chains that were very efficient and allowed them to manufacture at a much cheaper cost. That was like this great innovation. But the problem is it's not a free lunch. It wasn't just some better way of managing things. It means that when shit happens, then you're ultimately going to be stuck holding the bag. So it's a question of, do we want to have a lot of redundancy, and do we want to have backup options in our supply chain so that when shit happens, everything's still moving well for us? Or do we want to operate really well during the good times and really poorly during the bad times? So like that kind of like changed the way I think a lot of people operate, right? Like, coming out of the pandemic, people are like, okay, people are working from home way more. That changed everything. Supply chains have kind of changed. So, I mean, you could kind of argue that perhaps we're in a, you know, or at least minimally in a marginally better situation for, you know, tariffs and trade disruption that we've been before, because people are planning for these things a bit more than they once were. But it's definitely something where it's very hard for the global economy to operate under these types of constraints. And I think we're only going to get into a world where like the geopolitical theory around this is just a bit of background. There's kind of like two like primary like geopolitical, you know, history 101 or whatever. There's like two primary views of the world where it's just like either you control Eurasia if you want to be a world dominating power. So you control Europe and Asia because there's enough commodities and there's enough trade routes to operate completely independently on that landmass, or you control the water. And the US became a global power because we controlled the water. And then we traded our control of the water for everything and all the abundance that we have today with other countries. And in that world is fracturing now. And we see a lot of this pressure that's happening now from the BRICS nations who want to control Europe and want to get access to other forms of commodities that are like strategically critical. And the US is losing control over a lot of those trade routes. So like the world's fracturing, and now trust is kind of like fizzling out in this global environment. And as this continues to develop, we're going to see a lot more like multipolarity in the world, where trade is something that's actually done within specific regions and groups rather than as much of like a global network. So because of that, people are just going to, it is going to create a cost for consumers, because that's probably not the most efficient way. Not probably, it certainly is not the most efficient way to be running an economy. And that's going to be a cost, and that's going to be what? Impacting prices effectively. Luckily, technology is going to be counteracting a lot of that because things are getting cheaper in other ways. But nonetheless, it is just a net cost that society is ultimately paying for. And politicians get to play their games in this prisoner's dilemma that they're all stuck in. The goal is to get rid of as much of their arbitrary power as possible so that we don't have to pay for this prisoner's dilemma that they're all stuck in with each other. And that's what technology does. And that's what Bitcoin does. And that's the goal. Like the only way to reduce the power of governments worldwide, because I don't want the US to lose power while China is not losing power. That puts me domestically at risk. I want all the governments to lose power in like a very short amount of time at the same time. And the only way to do that is through money. And like, that's why Bitcoin's so important for a lot of this, is it can actually, in a realistic way, reduce the overall power of governments by forcing them onto a neutral money. And then we can have much more efficient trade, and we can fight a lot less.
That would sure be nice. I would like it if both more or fewer of my tax dollars and fewer dollars printed out of thin air went to financing wars halfway around the world that are actually illegal wars because Congress never actually voted on them, and they're the only ones with the power to declare war. But they're all just classified as special military operations, and we get over that. Like I don't think we've actually declared war since the 40s. And
I didn't realize.
Yeah, no, like every war since then has been illegal, actually.
Right.
If you care about stuff like the Constitution, I don't know.
Right, that old thing.
that old rag. But no, I think you make a really good point, and that's why it's fascinating to see all of this play out right now. Because first of all, how lucky are we to live at this time when all of this is happening?
So cool.
Right? We got to be born before Bitcoin existed and watch Bitcoin reprice the entire world. Mm-hmm. That's incredible. Like my son is born after Bitcoin. Like he will not know a world where Bitcoin doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. Everybody who's born now only lives like this is a post-Bitcoin world. Bitcoin is now out there. The genie's out of the bottle, and it just exists. The world, like the genie doesn't go back in the bottle, right? There's no putting this back. Bitcoin exists now. It is changing these power structures, these power dynamics. And I do have that hope that Bitcoin actually does start to make war really unaffordable, because it just stops making sense, right? And there's a lot of interesting theses around here, obviously, like the software thesis and all of this, which people have varying opinions on. But it does give me a lot of hope that this Bitcoin is something that both at the individual level obviously gives us a heck of a lot more power, because we have a way to store our economic energy that cannot be debased, cannot be confiscated. We can teleport around the world at the speed of light and nobody can stop us. That automatically changes the power dynamics in terms of the individual's relationship to the state. But it also changes the power dynamics within states. Like You saw when Russia got cut off from the SWIFT system at the and had all of their basically U.S. assets they owned frozen at the beginning of the war with Ukraine. Like that kind of sent a bit of a shock to people, saying, "Oh wow, I mean, they should have known this already." But it's like, turns out you can just be cut off from another country's system, like very, very easily. And so I think we're going to see more of this, where countries realize that, because it doesn't make sense to settle in gold. It just doesn't. It doesn't make sense to do that. Like that's clunky. That's pre-information age technology, right? They're going to want to settle in Bitcoin, and they're going to need to settle in Bitcoin because honestly, they're not going to trust each other enough to settle in gold either. That would require doing audits of each other. You think Russia's letting China in or vice versa? I don't care how chummy they are. It's just not happening. And so it'll be really interesting to see. We've got as well here, Peter Dunworth is about to come up. We're gonna have you guys roll in together for a little bit, because let's just let's have it be a more the merrier situation. I'm gonna go ahead and bring Peter up on stage. Peter, how you doing, man? Good to see you. You are founder of the BTC Advisors. You want to maybe just give a quick little introduction to yourself? Do you and Eric know each other, by the way?
Oh, I know
Sure
Peter.
do.
What up, Peter?
Oh boy. Okay.
Good to see you, Eric.
Good to see you too, man.
And Walker, it's great to be with you. So I can't tell you how excited I've been, looking forward to catching up with you. And then I saw, Eric, you were going to be here. I was like, I really hope we get the chance to catch up, because there's a lot going on.
Yeah, no, and it's, Eric and I have been talking a little bit about just what we started out with was really the mismatch between what the current sentiment is that you see if you're, scrolling the news, looking on X, whatever, around Bitcoin, and the price action that you see, Bitcoin dipping down into the high 80s, which if we're talking in US dollar terms, right? Versus all of the incredibly bullish things that are happening. You've got nation states stacking. El Salvador just did one of their biggest buys ever, over 1,000 Bitcoin, holding almost 8,000 Bitcoin now total. Michael Saylor bought over 8,000 Bitcoin for strategy in one big old buy recently too. You've got Jack Dorsey's Square rolling out Bitcoin acceptance for 4 million plus merchants. All of these things happening, and countless others that are incredibly bullish. The price doesn't seem to reflect that. I'd love just your thoughts a little bit on this mismatch of where we're at right now. Are you seeing this asymmetry as well? It feels like the price is not reflecting everything that's happened in a very meaningful way. But that seems to both Eric and I to present a pretty incredible opportunity for anyone that is paying attention and has some steel cojones.
I agree with all of that. And putting a lot of thought into this, I think obviously expectations has a lot to do with being disappointed with the price action. But if we go back 3 years, we're sitting at circa $15,500, and now we're disappointed with 90,000. So obviously the expectations and managing those is critically important. But all of those points you raise are incredibly important for building a base support for Bitcoin at a $90,000 level or $100,000 level. And we've basically been flat for a year. And so obviously people get bored. Bitcoin's meant to be the volatile asset. It's meant to be the thing that goes to the moon. That's the asset that people buy that want a 10x return. And what I can't help but just think about is all of those incredibly positive things that you just mentioned. Those things are real for everyone in the industry. We all understand that those things are happening, but retail investors and really institutional investors as well, they don't actually really understand or comprehend what those changes are going to bring. And I can't help but think, what if this basically sideways to down period over the last 12 months is actually the flattening of that curve that sets us up for an exponential rise in the next 5 to 10 years? And that's my assertion, that we haven't really had a period of this flat price action in the last 15 years of Bitcoin. We really haven't seen that. It's been this long drawn out sideways price action, which has really bored everyone to death. April, it was 75,000, then it went to 126. This is where I think what we're getting set up for is an exponential rise over the next 5 years, because I don't see any other asset being able to fulfill the promise and solve the problems that we have in front of us. To your point earlier, gold, great settlement layer. It's pre-information age. What are we doing with that moving forward? I don't think that's the asset that hostile characters are going to want to settle with, because that's an asset that can be taken from them. To your point about Ukraine, literally, or Russia, the Russia-Ukraine war was it was literally just a popping of the bubble, the balloon, I think, where all of a sudden nation states were under the assumption that, hey, it's a gentleman's game and our gold is secure in Fort Knox or London or wherever you might have it, and whenever we need it, they'll gladly, give it to us. But Venezuela found out a few years ago, before Russia, that it actually isn't. That's not what happens when you're under pressure. And so nation states, whether it doesn't matter, if you look at a microcosm of the world and you look at it from a personal nature, I think all of us value the freedom and the sovereignty that Bitcoin brings us. On a corporate level, it gives you a sovereignty and a self-sufficiency that you have with no other. On a government, international level, Bitcoin provides all those things. What I think we're moving to, and this is the pendulum that's basically swinging back in a bit of a backlash from what we've seen over the last or previous 10 years, is a lot of countries, individuals, corporations want more sovereignty. And that means the underlying asset that's going to provide all of that is Bitcoin. So I think we're perfectly set up, and you nailed it with, this is the opportunity. You're going to look back on this in 5 or 10 years and go, damn, that was a year-long sideways action. Why didn't I take action? So
I'm right there with you. I mean, it feels like, and Checkmate, James Check does some really great analysis on this, where he's basically laid out that, look, if you miss the whatever 5 to 10 best days of Bitcoin, like it's basically 5 to 10 days in a year where Bitcoin does all of its violent moves to the upside. If you're not in the market for those days, you miss out on basically all of that upside. You could be in the market the rest of the time, but if you're out for those days, you are missing out on everything essentially. And so this is why I think, just for, I mean, whether you are an individual, whether you are a corporation, whether you are a nation state, it's like, you just want exposure to Bitcoin, and you want it now. And trying to, I think, unless you are the most sophisticated, technical analyst that's ever lived and can absolutely time the highs and the lows perfectly, and maybe you can, but most people can't, right? Like, you should just dollar cost average in and get some sort of exposure to Bitcoin, because this thing is going one direction. It's going up and to the right with volatility. Eric, you mentioned earlier kind of the Weimar gold versus the German mark chart, which is what we're seeing a lot right now, right? Probably a little bit of a different time frame, a little bit of a different sort of prolonged fiat collapse across a bunch of different fiats at the same time. But undeniably, like, when you're measuring with a fiat measuring stick, Bitcoin's going to look volatile. But nothing on the Bitcoin side has changed. Things have only gotten more bullish. Like, there's no bearish news that has come out about Bitcoin, right? It's like, you can try to attribute various macro factors to this. None of that actually matters in terms of what Bitcoin is and what it does for you. And again, it just feels like, for anybody who's out there and just thinking like, well, I'm just going to keep waiting for it to go lower, I'm just going to keep doing what, like, boy, I mean, good luck. But unless you're Eric's mom, you cannot catch the bottom perfectly. Like, that's right. I think that's what we've determined.
That's right. Yeah. She's the only one that can do it. Subscribe to my channel. I'll let you know when she's buying.
Should set up a dashboard for this, Eric. Really, like, get that indicator. I think
I'll just I'll set up a live cam in her kitchen, and she'll
perfect.
Okay, I'm buying.
Oh man, what do you think that and I'd love both of your opinions on this. Maybe we can start with you, Eric. We talked about the inflection point earlier, and BlackRock being, Larry Fink, given his BlackRock stamp of approval, being a pretty interesting inflection point for just overall perception, the shifting of the Overton window. What are you looking at for the next inflection point? Is there a bit of news that actually has the potential to move the Bitcoin market in a meaningful way? Or are we just on this path where, Peter, like you said, we just keep getting bored. Like, it's going to be boring all the way to 1 million, right? And in the meantime, you're going to blink one day and you're going to be like, oh shit, when did that happen? Like, are you looking for something specific to happen? Is there anything that could happen that would move the market really meaningfully to the upside? Is it the US saying, hey, we're going to actually actively buy Bitcoin in a budget neutral way, even though they said they did already, but whether or not that'll happen, we'll see. Like, what would actually move the needle in your opinion?
I think, like, the biggest thing to our conversation earlier, when we were talking about there's all these fundamental things that are happening in the background, and they get incorporated in the market once there's some sort of major news announcement. And there's a bunch of board meetings, there's a bunch of strategy conversations, there's a bunch of things that happened over a period of, months or years that ultimately led to that news announcement. And like the biggest thing that I'm watching brewing in the background right now is, to your point earlier, we're seeing adoption from the Czech central bank, and they've been posturing this adoption for a period of time. We've seen other government adoption, and to the geopolitical considerations that I was mentioning earlier, that is what I think is fundamentally happening in the background, is that there's a bunch of central banks, there's a bunch of governments, and there's a lot of conversations being had, and they're saying the world's getting less certain. We're all going to start allocating to commodities more, and we've been witnessing that happen for a period of time. Rather than the debt of other countries that they're dependent on in their reserves, they start saying, okay, well, we don't really trust what the outcomes of this are going to be over the next decade. We need to start thinking about hard assets that are things that we know we need. And we witnessed that. We've witnessed growth in reserves and commodities for a period of time. This has been a structural shift. Like another really interesting statistic is just that like the BRICS nation, like intra-trade between them, that's tripled over the past decade. And that's that fracturing that's starting to happen. So pretty much what we're seeing is there's this shift towards commodities, and that's incredibly bullish. There's a major shift towards gold. That's incredibly bullish. All of these things are posturing for Bitcoin, which we all know is the ultimate substitute. But the problem, or substitute for those commodities and the reserves, the problem that they see is that if you're Saudi Arabia and you want to go liquidate $250 billion worth of Bitcoin today, you're going to move that market. And, gold being such a not efficient for trade, at least in physical settlement, but being such a large market, it's much more liquid in terms of the size of the market. And that's a huge competitive advantage that certain commodities and gold have over Bitcoin today, just because Bitcoin's small. And so that's the best problem you could possibly have. That's like saying, LeBron James is not as good at basketball because he's in high school right now. Like that's like the perfect thing. It's just like, okay, we can get this before it becomes what it is. And that's its only problem. So that's what I'm witnessing, is there's a bunch of governments where it's starting to get to a much larger size where it's in the conversation, particularly for smaller governments that don't need as much liquidity, like in El Salvador and in some of these others that we've witnessed adoption in. And as it grows, this problem gets, exponentially resolved. And that's the thing. When Bitcoin doubles in size, now the market for potential reserves increases, which also means more buying, which means it's going to double in size. And that's like that inflection point in growth that we'll start seeing. Because as that problem resolves, it's just going to make more and more sense to be a reserve asset. So like that's the biggest thing that I am curious to watch, is more governments getting on a standard like that. And that's super, super bullish, Walker.
I say amen to that. Peter, what about you? What are you looking for? Is there something that you think would move the needle?
I think all of those points are good, and to sort of build on some of that, I think if we had a re-rating of the gold at the Treasury from $44 to $4,000, $5,000, whatever it might be, that's a huge catalyst. That frees up, if the strategic Bitcoin reserve goes through, then that frees up trillions of dollars for the government to build their strategic reserve, which they talked of. Now, I know we've all been disappointed with that, but I've got to say the current administration is a whole lot better than the previous one when it comes to the support of Bitcoin in the broader crypto industry. I think they've provided regulatory guidance which has made it safe for institutions and larger companies to play in. And it's also, I think, freed up what Eric just talked about, nation state adoption, because now if the big boys are doing it and the global leader in the US has supported it and endorsed it, then that's a big positive. But if I take it down to a political level, I think the most powerful family in the world right now, the Trumps, obviously with being president, and that family's clearly highlighted that their number one investment over the next few years is going to be Bitcoin. So what are the levers that family can pull to create an exponential upside to Bitcoin? And this is where I don't think they're going to get the returns in the property market that they've seen. I don't think they're going to be investing in the stock market. Obviously, he's got DJT, but outside of that, it's really Bitcoin. And this is where I look at, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome. That family with more levers than anyone else is heavily invested in Bitcoin. I'm like, you would have to be crazy to fade that kind of information. And I think over the next, say, 6 to 9 months, just before the the midterms in the US, we're going to see exactly what the US government can do by way of supporting that. And if that happens, that frees up trillions of dollars. That puts Michael Saylor to shame when it comes to his buying with that sort of liquidity that can be injected into the market. And this is where I really think that work that Riggs BTC and Wicked Smart do with the curve that goes vertical, sideways, and then vertical again when it comes to price action, they're going to be the catalyst, I think, for what we're seeing. And this is where you've seen one billionaire understand what Bitcoin is and move heaven and earth to get as much of it as he can. The logical next step is for a nation state with a money printer to realize what Michael Saylor has and start abusing that privilege with the money printer to go and buy Bitcoin. And that, to me, is a catalyst I think we're going to see in less than 2 years. And if it's in an expedited fashion, we'll see that before, say, August next year. So that'll be fun.
Well, I want to dig into that even more. We are going to go to a quick commercial break, and I also need to bid farewell to Eric. Eric, I know you got to drop here. Thank you so much for joining. Really appreciated you coming here on Roxham TV. You're welcome back anytime. We got to have more broccoli hair representation here. So very much appreciated, man. Peter, we're going to be right back with you here in a moment. I want to dig into this needle moving activity a little bit more, but stay tuned. We'll be right back after a quick break.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the center of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're traveling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxham, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxham, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index is collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
All right, welcome back to Roxham TV. I'm here with Peter Dunworth. Peter, we were just talking right before this, before we had to bid farewell to Eric, and you were actually the timeline that you just gave for the United States potentially making some pretty colossal moves is honestly, like took me aback a little bit because and maybe I'm just being a little bit too naysayerish about this, because I just generally don't trust government to keep their word about anything. But I mean, so just to recap for folks that may not have, or maybe just hopped in, you're basically saying you think there's a meaningful chance that the U.S. makes some sort of a large move, the Trump administration, kind of prior to basically midterms next year, as it relates to the Bitcoin strategy, essentially a divergence from just holding whatever confiscated coins they may have. And instead, I assume you're implying they are going to pursue that budget neutral lever that they had stated in the executive order to be able to actively acquire Bitcoin. Is that what you're getting at there?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I think if you look at the tea leaves, you need to get things in place before you pull something like that. And without wanting to sugarcoat or lay this on Trump alone, but everyone acts in their own best interests. And I look at the options that Trump has for generational wealth. He's built it in property and a whole host of other marketing initiatives. But I look at how does he take his wealth to the next level that isn't encumbered by property or regulations or oversight or management or anything else. Bitcoin's the answer for that. So that solves that problem. What have we seen in the last 12 months from that family when it comes to Bitcoin? We've seen DJT, the coin or the listed entity, buy billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. We've seen his most corporate son in Eric go on the board of Bitcoin Treasury Company in Metaplanet. And I'm sure there's a whole host of other things that family is doing that I'm not aware of. So he's got all the players in place to take advantage of it. Now, what I'm seeing happen, and this is literally only a recent announcement, if you go and have a look at Twitter, you've got Matt Gaetz, who is very close to the Trumps. You know, he was appointed Attorney General and then got shot down in Congress. Have a look at his most recent tweet. He's basically come out and said, has anyone seen this? And it's a tweet of the accumulation of 8,000 coins that El Salvador has. Now, you look at the long line of procession that's happened from the US administration or those close to it to El Salvador over the last 12 months. You've seen Don Jr. go to El Salvador. You've seen Matt Gaetz go to El Salvador, a whole host of other US dignitaries. They're all learning about what this Strategic Bitcoin Reserve has done to El Salvador. They've seen the prosperity that it's brought. Obviously, it's practically a third world country and they're trying to lift themselves out of it, but it's gone from the most horrifically menacing country by way of murders to the safest country in the world. These are all huge net positives. And I think this sort of thing takes time. And so the players on the chessboard are basically getting into their positions. And to me, that was a huge tell from Matt Gaetz signaling and blasting out on Twitter, hey, has anyone seen this? Have a look at this. That to me is a harbinger of what's to come. So I look at that and think we're probably going to see that before the midterms is realistic time frame for that, because from what I'm seeing politically, I can't see, or I think the Republican Party are in huge trouble to maintain the House in the midterms. So Trump basically has to get all of this done before the midterm elections. So that puts it down in less than 12 months that we see all of this if he wants this to happen. And I just look at, show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome. Everything is aligned to achieve that.
I mean, okay, that's fair. I hadn't seen, I obviously saw Bukele's tweet about this. I did not see, I know that Matt Gaetz was just there in El Salvador. And honestly, just looking at this chart that Bukele posted is just like, it's just nuts. I mean, it's a massive amount of Bitcoin, and it is pretty incredible to see this small nation be doing everything they can, not just to pull their people out of the incredible misery of the gang violence that they were living under for decades, but then to also start educating their people about Bitcoin, to start using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. And yes, there have been plenty of setbacks there, and plenty of people who are happy to, be very critical of those moves. At the same time, it's like, man, it's pretty incredible to see this happening, that you would have a leader who is trying to get his people educated about freedom money. And that's ultimately what it is. And not just that, but stacking it at the nation state level. You've also, of course, you've got the Kingdom of Bhutan, who very, famously now was mining Bitcoin with excess hydropower. You've got some other nations who I think have probably been silently stacking. It does seem like there's just going to be this point where like they're playing a game of kind of like a little game of chicken right now, right? All these global players, where it's like, who's going to act first? Because the one that does act first, a very big play, this is not to discount El Salvador. This is like, what they're doing is amazing. But obviously the US operates on a different level than that. Right? And if the US makes a move here, boy, it's going to be interesting. This is all happening as well against the backdrop of China and Russia increasing their gold reserves, right? The US, I don't know if we have any gold, actually. I still think we've had an audit of Fort Knox. We were kind of promised that. Don't know what happened there. I don't know if Trump took a tour of it and realized it was a lot more spacious and empty than he initially thought. I don't know, but it seems to me that if you wanted to give yourself the greatest geopolitical advantage, you would not buy up a ton of the asset that your enemy or frenemies, whatever, have already been accumulating at record paces. You would pick up as much as you can of the asset that they are currently discounting, right?
Yeah.
That would seem to me the most advantageous move. And in terms of ownership, Bitcoin ownership is most concentrated in the United States, not at a corporate level, at a individual level as well, and of course at a nation state confiscated level. So to me, it just makes sense, right? That it's going to happen eventually.
That is a huge point about where is Bitcoin domiciled, and percentage-wise, I would have thought somewhere upwards of 40% of Bitcoins would be domiciled in the US. That to me is a huge strategic advantage that the US has that they just don't have in the gold sector. And so, arguably the greatest trade the US could ever do is dump their gold on the market and flip it for Bitcoin. But whether we see that or not, I don't think they're going to do that, because typically Bitcoin adoption happens in waves, in predetermined patterns that we've all gone through as Bitcoiners. You start off with a little bit, you buy a little bit more, then you look around at the assets that you've got and you figure out, well, what assets don't I need? And you get rid of those. And then you look at the assets that you've got and you think, well, what assets can I finance to buy this asset returning 40 or 50% versus the asset that I'm holding that's returning 5 or 10? And then you come to the realization that, well, the assets that I've got financed other than the home, I want to get rid of, because what's the point of holding a sub-performing asset? And so I think the decision makers need to go through this, and we will see this slowly adopted. So to me, the most likely chance of that happening, and what is going to happen, I believe, is we're going to see the gold re-rated. That fixes up a whole lot of plumbing problems for the Treasury. And then that also frees up trillions of dollars on the balance sheet to then go and buy Bitcoin, which will make Sailor look like an insignificant player in relative terms. So Sailor has been the market for the last 4 years, and all of a sudden there might be a new boss, a new final boss for Bitcoin.
Well, let me ask you, so does that revaluing of the gold, basically marking it to market, because it's currently still valued at the basically 1971 value, right? Like that's how it's looked at. And obviously, if they acknowledge that, yes, gold is actually worth this much today in dollar terms, which we know it is because that's what the market says, then that's kind of really just saying like, well, that's inflation, guys. That's like that's what you've had taken from you. But would that count as a budget neutral acquisition method still within the bounds of that initial executive order that the Trump admin put out there?
I'm not sure. I don't know the plumbing details deeply enough, but
Sure.
All I'd say is if there's political will to say that it's public, it's budget neutral, then that's what you're classified as. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's a matter of is it or not. And this is the beauty of having an administration that's positive on Bitcoin. They literally control the pen. So he who controls the pen wins. They can say whatever they want and call it whatever they want. So I don't think there'd be a problem in saying that it's budget neutral. And this is where, say, from a Bitcoiner's perspective, having support from the government, I understand this is a double-edged sword. So I just sort of tread carefully on this, that I don't think Bitcoin needs the support of a government. And it's probably important that it doesn't have it. It's had 16 years of being successful without it. But when the government wants to lean on something to support it, there are a whole host of outcomes that can be wildly positive to the upside for coin distribution to every citizen in the US. They can self-custody it. The government can basically institute a whole host of policies that make it affordable for everyone. What happens if they gave a 30-year loan term against buying Bitcoin, and instead of saving, say, $10,000 or call it $100 a month, for $1,200 you could get exposure to half a Bitcoin on a 30-year term that doesn't need to be repaid for 30 years and doesn't have a call option on it if the Bitcoin goes under the value. All of a sudden, these are the things that have been done with property over the last 40 years to encourage home ownership. And I look at this and think, and this is probably quite a take, but Bitcoin is far more important for US citizens and global citizens than property ownership. We've got a glut of property in the market. We've got a whole host of investors who have got 5 or 10 different, investment properties. We don't have a housing shortage if the investment properties and the second homes, third homes, fourth homes were used for what they were intended to. But because there's a monetary premium in the real estate market, basically that forces the price up. And what we're seeing, and this is the really important thing I think moving forward that we're going to see, is the ability for Wall Street to speculate on Bitcoin rather than the US property market is going to lead to the demonetization of property. And that monetary premium in properties is going to come back. Now, that's going to solve housing affordability, cost of living crisis, and this is the asset that really is going to be instrumental in creating that collateral that we need moving forward. And the US has an option to basically provide a whole host of facilities, loan facilities, support, regulations, whatever you want, to get Bitcoin into every single US citizen's hands. Now, I would love a government that's that proactive, but we're years behind the curve. But in the US, you've got a government that's proactive on Bitcoin and has the ability to do that. So I look at that and think, these are the suggestions that we want to get to decision makers to empower the US for the next 50 to 100 years.
One of the things that you've talked about, I think you talked about this on Marty Bent's show recently, was this kind of this Bitcoinization of finance. And, you're like, obviously there's a lot that's broken in our current financial system, our current fiat financial system, right? And I think that what you brought up about real estate is a extremely important point, because it's not that we have a shortage of real estate, right? It's not the case. It's just that it has been used as a store of value because our money is broken. So we've looked for alternative stores of value because the money itself is not performing as money should, right? The money is broken. Thus, broken money leads to us pursuing other things to be able to store the value of our time and energy that won't be debased or that will benefit from fiat monetary inflation. How do you see this happening? You've also talked about Bitcoin bonds and some of these other things, whether it be in the US or anywhere else in the world, do you think that this is something that ends up happening from the top down? Like, is this something that really, in order to really move the needle for the most people, it happens with the government pursuing these policies, somehow becoming more responsible, held to more account because of Bitcoin? Or is this something that happens from the private sector, we're already seeing this happen from the bottom up, with individuals taking it into their own hands to say, I'm saving in Bitcoin. Like, I'm changing my personal finances to center them around Bitcoin. So you're seeing corporations do that. How do you see this interplay? Because we've been talking about the government side of things, but obviously, like, Bitcoin is fundamentally a bottom-up movement, and that bottom-up is kind of what really changes the world. How do you look at that interplay? What is kind of the role of each there, the bottom-up and the top-down?
That's a great question, and I think the two don't have to be mutually exclusive. I think if you want to change your world, personally, you want to buy Bitcoin, hold as much of it as you can for as long as possible, and you can benefit from all of that upside. So I think on a hyper Bitcoinization level, that happens at the personal level first. And then once you're in a strong enough financial position, then you can start affecting those outside your world. Now, what I think happens is two things are going to happen at once. We are going to have more and more people providing their own Bitcoinization, hyper-Bitcoinization from a personal level. That is going to create a critical mass that then makes it acceptable for a top-down approach. And this is where you have, basically a very loud minority is going to affect huge change. That market is probably 2 to 3% of some really loud voices. And I think we're getting closer and closer to that, where now the Bitcoin community has affected significant change. Politically, it was huge in the last US election. Dave Bailey, I want to give a shout out to. He's under pressure at the moment, but he's been instrumental in, basically politicizing Bitcoin. And I think for the better, because it's better than the previous administration when it comes to that. But all of these things need to be in place in order for the top-down approach to happen. And now from a critical perspective, I think the most important thing anyone can do is look after themselves first. Apply your own face mask first when you're in a plane crash. Just get yourself sorted first. And Bitcoin solves that on a personal level. It solves it on a family level. But this is where what's really interesting about that Matt Gaetz tweet and Nayib Bukele is that solves the nation state level as well. So if I'm looking and sort of reading between the lines, you've seen Bessent give a $20 billion bailout to Argentina because they're friends of the US. If we were rewinding maybe 3 months, the IMF had a hold of El Salvador. They had to stop their Bitcoin purchase. Reading between the lines, they weren't allowed to buy anymore. And in the last 2 days, Nayib Bukele comes out and says, we've just bought 1,000 more Bitcoin. And then Gates retweets it. I'm like, come on, boys. Like, how could it be any more obvious that the US is giving cover for El Salvador to go and buy Bitcoin and basically stick the middle finger up to the IMF? Whatever your covenants are on our loans, we don't give a shit. We're now backed by the US. So I look at this and I just find it very amusing, and it's wildly bullish.
Interesting. Okay, now we need to unpack that more, because that's a very fascinating angle, and I don't think I've seen anybody else come forward with that yet. But now that you're saying it, that does kind of make sense. Okay, I want to dig into that more, because now the wheels are spinning. We do have to hit a very quick commercial break, and then we will be back. This commercial needs to be over quickly, because I've got a lot of questions here that need answering, Peter. Okay, we'll be right back. Don't touch that dial. We'll see you in just a minute.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy. Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the center of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're traveling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxum, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxum, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
All right, welcome back to Roxum TV. I am Walker America. I am here with Peter Dunworth. Peter, just before the break, you dropped a little bit of a bomb, which is the idea that perhaps with this recent massive purchase of Bitcoin by El Salvador, the recent signaling by Matt Gaetz that, hey, are you paying attention to this about El Salvador's Bitcoin buys, and the obvious friendly relationship with the Trump administration, that this may be an instance where the U.S., the Trump admin, is somehow backing or providing cover for El Salvador to basically say, hey, IMF, hands off, let them do what they're going to do. Is that kind of what you're getting at there? And I mean, obviously the U.S. is one of the, the IMF is headquartered here. It's one of the key players in the International Monetary Fund. Are you thinking that the administration is basically saying, listen, back off, like I don't care what the deal says, let El Salvador buy Bitcoin? And if so, what would be the goal there?
I think this is all pure speculation.
Of course.
This is just putting pieces together. I don't know anyone who's on the inside, but I'm looking at what's presented to me. And why am I seeing this? Well, I'm seeing this obviously for a reason. We're all seeing it for a reason. And I want to go back, whether it's 6 or 12 months ago, I can't quite remember, when the IMF had to, I think it was less than 6 months ago, but time sort of just loses all relativity at the moment because everything happens so quickly, right? But there was a distinct curbing of the Bitcoin purchases from El Salvador, that the IMF put a contingency or a caveat on the loan that they were giving them, that they had to stop purchasing Bitcoin if they wanted that IMF loan to roll. El Salvador wasn't in a position to basically pay the loan out, and they needed to roll that in some way, shape or form. Now, the US wasn't in a position to give the aid directly, but what we've seen in the last 3 months is Argentina basically had a $20 billion bailout, or a swap line extended to it. It's not a bailout, but kind of looks like a duck, walks like a duck, smells like a duck, so maybe. And I look at this and think, we haven't heard anything about these Bitcoin purchases from Bukele for the last God knows how long. And then quietly, he just comes up with $1,000 purchase in the last week, 1,000 Bitcoin purchase in the last week, putting his tally from 7,000 to 8,000. He's purchased nearly 15% more Bitcoin in 1 week. I sort of look at that and I think, just contextualizing everything that we're seeing out here, Matt Gaetz, a whole host of the Trump administration going down there, folks close to Trump, including his children, turning up to El Salvador to have a look at this. And I can't help but draw parallels to, say, the Bitcoin network. We look at the evolution of the Lightning Network, Layer 2. It's arguably the biggest, the most successful Layer 2 that we have on Bitcoin. That didn't start with Bitcoin. That started with Litecoin. And then, Bitcoiners being Bitcoiners thought, well, that's a great idea. That's been tested on a test net. Let's adopt that on our network and then implement any good idea from any other network on the Bitcoin network. Now, why wouldn't the US operate exactly the same way? The US being Bitcoin, the biggest network, the most powerful government out there. Let's test this little assumption that Bitcoin can solve a whole host of problems for a small country in El Salvador, i.e. let them cook, and then let's see how that plays out. And if it plays out, well, why don't we just do this on a larger scale on the bigger network? And I look at that and think all eyes are on El Salvador for a reason, because firstly, Bukele, I have huge admiration for. It gives me goosebumps thinking about this, that he's restored law and order and made it safe for people, which I just think is a huge achievement given that country and the problems that it had. But he is, in the space of less than a decade, taking it from a third world country to arguably one of the greatest countries on earth. Property rights have been restored. All of a sudden, if we fast forward maybe 5 or 10 years, Bukele might have 40,000 Bitcoin by then, and that would be more than enough to solve the debt crisis, in inverted commas, that they have. So I look at this and think, if I'm smart, I'm looking at ways to basically test out theories. And this is a really cheap, expedited way of testing out the theory around Bitcoin and how that would apply to a much bigger network in solving the US's problems. So I can't help but think what we're witnessing there is basically a test case like Lightning on Litecoin, and pretty soon it'll be adopted to the big markets, which actually ties into having all of this set up and done before the midterms, where Trump potentially loses control of being able to do that.
Oh, it is. Okay, this is a fascinating theory, and it does make some sense, right? Like, we also know that, politicians care about elections, right? This is not a shocking statement. This is just a very reasonable statement of fact. We know that, I think, especially after some of these recent mayoral elections in the United States, New York as a key example, you've got a lot more, let's say, left-leaning folks that are getting into positions of power. And you could say, well, these were already, liberal cities, Democratic strongholds. And, granted, in New York, the candidate opposing Mandami was famous for locking down the whole city and, causing many, well, I don't know what I'm allowed to say on air, but didn't do a good job, right? Obviously. So boy, but point being, I've got to imagine that the Trump administration and Donald Trump, specifically President Trump, is looking at some of this and saying, okay, I need to do something to get that base that was fired up about me and also donating lots of money to myself and to other Republican candidates to care again, right? And I've got to do something that's going to really set us apart and be bold, and it's going to be something that, the great thing about Bitcoin is that it's just, for anybody that spent even a few minutes looking at this, it's an obvious good. It's an obviously good thing for the individual, for the corporation, for the family, for the nation state, for the central bank even. It's good for anyone who holds it. So and we also know that, at least in the US and in many countries, it's but in the US, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola duopoly, if one side says they like something, the other side usually says, here's why that thing's bad, and the other side is evil incarnate for even suggesting that it's good. But when you have something that is an obvious and a really obvious good, a net benefit for the world, for America, for individuals like Bitcoin, and you put that up and say, I'm going to do this thing. President Trump, I'm going to do this thing that is going to be obviously beneficial for my citizens, for getting the national debt in check, for establishing, a longer running global, power dynamic, all these things. It looks really dumb to come out against that. You start looking like Elizabeth Warren, right? You start looking like, well, you're divorced from reality. You don't know what, you're just being absurd. You're obviously just being partisan and playing partisan politics with something that could be very good for Americans. So I think you bring up a good point that maybe this is kind of positioning ahead of these next midterms to say, look, the Republicans are out here and we're trying to make our nation more fiscally responsible as much as it can be, because we know nothing stops this train, Lynn Alden's fiscal dominance thesis. But I mean, it kind of makes sense. And to use El Salvador as a proving ground for it, obviously that's very beneficial for El Salvador. And if the Trump administration was somehow able to give basically tell the IMF dogs to hey, go kennel up, back off, let El Salvador do its thing, try to, get your boot away from them. That's very interesting. I don't know. It's going to be really fascinating because we're going to see this move pretty quickly, right? We're talking about less than a year away, basically, where we'd see this sort of start to play out. I mean, do you think that kind of change? I mean, how fast would the cascade be of other nation states starting to look at this and say, like, if the U.S. makes this move, oh shit, we got to do something right now? Like, do things get really wild, really, really fast?
You know what? Just to put it in a visual context, remember the movie The Dictator with Sacha Baron Cohen?
Yep.
And he's lined up at the 100-meter race and he's holding the gun, and all of the competitors make sure that they don't run faster than him, otherwise they're going to get shot. This is the analogy I look at, that the US is holding the gun. They, I say this facetiously, they're the dictator when it comes to
but
this,
also kind of, almost literally also.
Yeah, you do what we say, and the US dollar's been instrumental in providing, basically avoiding World War III over the last 70 years. So I'm, obviously want to give credit where credit's due, but I look at this and think this is literally what we have right now. We have a race about to start. Everyone's primed for it. You don't reckon the Saudis are chomping at the bit to come out and say, we're going to buy Bitcoin. We're sick of buying US treasuries. There's only so much US treasuries we can have. We really want the other stuff. And, they make billions of dollars a day. They could put a bid on that, let alone they could, if they actually monetized any of their gas, they could have probably one of the largest, Bitcoin mining fleets on earth. You think Russia's not sitting there? Well, Russia's doing whatever it's doing, and they're probably not going to tell us anyway. But you look at South Korea, North Korea, Iran. Iran's basically got 5%, or did have up until last time I checked anyway. They had 5% of the mining capacity, basically generating Bitcoin. I look at this and think the whole world is lined up at the starting line, waiting for the US to say, shoot the gun, and basically say, we're on, it's a race now. And I look at that and think the US is perfectly positioned, but what we haven't seen is we haven't seen a nation state of the size of the US be able to buy Bitcoin in the size that they want. So this is where I look at this and think this is literally like a thumb on the scale like we haven't seen. Michael Saylor was fantastic. In the last 5 years, he's bought 650,000 Bitcoin. That's been unbelievable. What happens when a nation state with its own printer and the global reserve currency says, we're going to enter this game now and we are going to be the market leader in it? And I can tell you 1 million coins for the US is not going to be sufficient. By my calculations, the US should hold at least, if it wants to maintain its role in the world, it needs to have at least 6 million coins, or 30% of the network.
Okay. How do you begin to, like, if we're still looking at our fiat measuring sticks, how do you begin to value Bitcoin, again, from the fiat lens, if something like this starts happening? Like, how do you even this just seems like it breaks any models that are out there right now.
I think it does. And this is what I'm looking at and think, just from a human incentive perspective, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcomes. There is going to be someone brave enough to do that. Now, I look at what's going on geopolitically and think we're fast approaching that period of time. And what happens is, basically, this puts huge pressure upwards on the price of Bitcoin. And, basically being a vassal state of the US in Australia and New Zealand, I want the US to win. I love the US. I think they've been a really good, obviously done some bad things, but overall they've been a wonderful steward as a global leader. And I want to see that role continue because it's been a benevolent dictatorship, particularly for us in sort of the Commonwealth countries. And I look at this, this is where putting a bid of that size and that scale onto Bitcoin totally changes the dynamics. And this is where, if you tie into one of the major problems that we've got at the moment, arguably the greatest financial problem that we have is the debt. And, I literally talk about this till I'm blue in the face, and I'm like, it's not a debt problem, it's a collateral problem. We need to clearly define what the problem is. So you can't solve the problem if you don't know or you don't clearly define what it is. So everyone's talking about the debt problem and, we've got all this debt to pay off. And it's like, no, the problem is not that there's a debt problem. The problem is that there's no collateral to pay the debt off if needed. And this is where Bitcoin can actually solve that problem. And, to Eric's point earlier, when he talked about, the Saudis can't sell $250 billion worth of Bitcoin without shifting the market dramatically, but they can in gold. This is the opportunity. This is the feature, not the bug of Bitcoin. This is the upside potential that Bitcoin's got to get 20, 30, 50, 100x bigger than where it is now to actually fulfill that role. And this is where no other asset can do that with a minimal impact on society. If you inflate the property market, it increases the cost of living crisis, it increases the cost of housing. That's a bad thing. If you do it through the stock market, there's not really enough equity to do it, and we're already trading at all-time high price earnings ratios. It's kind of looking a lot like 1929. You can't do it through the bond market because that's literally only exacerbating the problem. And you don't want to do it through commodities because that filters through to everything. So I look at this and think, what's the one asset that we can solve this problem that has the least impact, that benefits the smallest amount of people, which is a feature, not a bug. You don't want to benefit everyone because then that's inflationary. So I look at that and think, that solves a big problem. This is where, when we tie it into what we talked about, El Salvador is a test net for the US. I look at this and think maybe the chances of this happening before the midterms next year is a little bit higher than 50-50.
Wow. Okay. Honestly, Peter, it sounds like we need to get a prediction market going for this. Too.
This would be fun, wouldn't it? Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know what I'm doing right after right after the stream. Okay, so I mean, that's, so to your point though. Maybe the one contradiction I see is, and maybe this isn't a contradiction at all, so I want your opinion on it. But you mentioned, okay, a really big player is going to move the market significantly, depending on how they orchestrate their buys as well, right? They would move the market significantly if they come into Bitcoin in size. And we're talking, let's say Saudi Arabia or US government type size, not just, Michael Saylor's coming in size for a corporation massively, but they're different orders of magnitude, right? There are different levers that can be pulled. Does that fact that it will move the market massively if you come in size with Bitcoin at its current market cap of around 2 trillion, does that at all contradict what you're talking about in terms of a timeline where the U.S. government would want to maybe do this prior to midterm elections, in the space of the next year? Or do they just go in knowing they're going to move the market massively and there's going to be a ton of slippage as they try to execute those buys? Because, man, depending on how they do it, they're going to have trouble finding all the coins they want, perhaps. How do you square that circle? Or is that just not a contradiction at all? And they're going to be like, yeah, it's going to move the market, whatever, it doesn't matter. We're the US fucking government. Is that what it comes down to?
At some point in time, we're going to get to a point where no one is going to care. We are going to revert to our base nature, our reptilian brain that is purely driven from greed and fear. I've been saying for years that Bitcoin is a need, not a want. When a government realizes that this is a need, not a want, they aren't going to give a shit, pardon the French, about moving the market. They need to get it. It's as important as oxygen, and you are going to fight or kill whoever you have to get what you need. And when that realization dawns on the governments around the world, we are going to see a fight like we've never seen for Bitcoin. All of the TradFi guys in markets are like, no, that's not how markets are structured. Markets go like this, they go up, they go sideways, they go down. That lets us get a sophisticated buy-in. Let me tell you, if you had the opportunity to buy, say, the last tank of oxygen on Earth for $1,000 and it was trading at $100, are you going to sit there and say, oh no, I could pick it up for 101 or 102? And you've got $10,000 in your pocket? No, that's stupid. That's crazy. That's not how risk works. You just pay whatever you've got to secure what you need to survive. And this is what's going to happen when it dawns on the US, the government, regulators, that this is the thing that they need for the US to survive. And my expectation is the US needs to maintain its global hegemony. It probably needs 30% of the Bitcoin network, which puts that at 6 million Bitcoin. 1 million is not going to be enough.
6 million Bitcoin that's a lot of corn, Peter. That's a lot of corn. Do you even, depending on which estimates you look at, perhaps if the US government starts buying in that kind of size over whatever time frame, you see a lot more OG coins that perhaps we previously thought were lost start to be unlost. Who knows? But I mean, that is a lot of corn. I wonder, it's like, if you start as an individual, if you start seeing that happening, I'm curious how many people, if they saw that happening, are going to be like, yeah, okay, take my coins at whatever the going rate is on that particular day, as Bitcoin is just ripping people's faces off. But I'm having trouble even conceptualizing what that would look like, and I guess it depends on what sort of a time frame they end up trying to make that accumulation happen. You know what I mean? Like, the timing would be everything. If we're talking over the space of 6 months, that's different from the space of 10 years, right? Like, it's, or if we're talking 6 weeks, or, like, it's all about timing. I mean, do you have a thought for how they would try to move it? It seems like you're suggesting if they would move in that kind of size, assuming they would probably want to do it as rapidly as possible, because they know that is the starting gun, right?
Yeah. I think if you break this down, and I've only put a little bit of thought into this, and I'm sure there's much smarter people that can talk to this than me, but I think 6 million coin is achievable. Realistically, they're going to be the first to crack quantum. So whatever 4 million coins are lost out there, they can recover those before anyone else, presumably. And I presume they'll have the resources to do that. So the 4 million coins that are lost go to the US government. There's 4 million of the 6 million that you've got to achieve. And then how do they get an additional 2 million Bitcoin over the next, call it 10 years? Well, I think they're going to be buying Bitcoin starting with a big chunk halfway through next year. And then they're just going to continue to buy it. They're going to have 3 years of budget neutral efforts to basically build out that Bitcoin. And if they're really lucky and productive at it, there's no reason to think that they can't get to an additional, go from 0 to 1 million coins over, well, till the end of Trump's second term. So when you break it down, I don't think they need to buy 6 million coins. I think they need to crack quantum and basically take all the coins that are lost. There's 4 million coins. And then over the next 10 years, they can get another 1 million or 2 million coins. I think that's quite achievable given the size of their balance sheet relative to what Sailor's achieved over the last 5 years.
And this is it safe to say, Peter, that you're pretty bullish right now from an NGU perspective? I mean, given all you've
sadly, I always am. And I look at this and around, sometimes I think, what am I missing here? This is what's presented in front of me. This is how I'm interpreting it, and why I love the opportunity to come and talk about these things, because I sit here and think I've never been more bullish on Bitcoin. I've never seen a better risk-adjusted opportunity in Bitcoin than right now, because Bitcoin's been totally de-risked. Maybe not from the volatility, but now it's 30% off its previous high. Oh my goodness, what an opportunity to go and buy Bitcoin. And to your question earlier, which I didn't get a chance to say, but I'll say this now. Whenever we speak to new clients who don't have any Bitcoin exposure whatsoever, my advice is to put whatever they've got allocated to it, just dump it all in tomorrow and buy Bitcoin. And there's 2 reasons for this. Firstly, they've done the work to understand they want Bitcoin, and they'll be really upset if they dollar cost average in, and then we have that Omega candle that Samson talks of, where it goes from 100 grand to 1 million. They'll feel stupid that they've missed that. The other thing is, if it goes the other way and it drops dramatically, I know that every person on Earth's first Bitcoin purchase is their smallest Bitcoin purchase. So I know they've got additional cash, they've got additional capital, other assets that they can put into Bitcoin if it moves the wrong way. So I look at this and think we're all on the same journey with Bitcoin. And this is the funny thing, to put a spiritual tinge to this, is what Bitcoin gives everyone on Earth is a shared experience. And this is the first time I've seen an opportunity for every human to have that shared experience, albeit with a technology which has no spirituality to it whatsoever.
And I've got to say, I was already very bullish going into this conversation, Peter. I'm even more bullish now. Do you still have a couple of minutes, or should I go ahead and read you out here? Just want to be conscious of your time.
I'm good. I've got another 15, 20 minutes if that's what you want to continue with.
Absolutely. We're going to have Nico Moran up here as well, founder of Simply Bitcoin, in just a second. So if I thought I couldn't get even more bullish after talking to you, I think Nico might be the one person who can take me to even new levels of bullishness here. And I think this is what people need right now. We're going to cut to a very quick commercial break. We're going to come back, and we are going to make all of ourselves, and probably anyone who is out there listening, even more bullish than you already were. Stay tuned. We will be right back with Nico Moran, founder of Simply Bitcoin. Don't touch that dial.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy. Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the centre of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're travelling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxum, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxum, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed two brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to Roxum TV, everyone. I am Walker America. I am here with Peter Dunworth and now Nico Moran, founder of Simply Bitcoin, the only man who could possibly make this stream any more bullish. Nico, how you doing, man?
Yo, dude, I'm super hyped to be here. Number one, I just became an actual podcaster the other day because I went on Walker's podcast. And for anyone who doesn't know, if you don't go on the Bitcoin podcast, you're not a podcaster yet. So, you know, I got to say, you know, Walker popped my cherry, man.
Oh boy. Oh boy. I hope my wife's not listening to this. You know, Nico, I'm stoked to have you here. We've been talking. We had Eric Yakes on, geez, can't even say it. Yakes on earlier. We got Peter now. We have been, let's say, discussing the mismatch that we see between all of the sentiment right now, between all of the just kind of bearish price action, Bitcoin wicking down to, below 90K, just generally people seeming to be kind of, down and out about this. Meanwhile, you've got gold bugs celebrating, you've got fiat economists celebrating, dancing on Bitcoin's grave because it's died yet again, right? Meanwhile, myself, Peter, I'm assuming it's like I'm feeling more bullish than kind of I ever have. Are you feeling this as well? Are we just crazy here? Are we smoking too much opium? Are you on the same page with us?
Dude, I mean, I'm feeling bullish just because you guys are with me right now. That in and of itself makes me really, really bullish. But I mean, look, like this year's been quite interesting, right? We had basically the first year in Bitcoin's history where, the price has literally gone sideways. You can even say that it's been a red year. But if you look at what's happening in the back end, like the fundamentals, like they've never been stronger. You have a pro Bitcoin administration coming in. You have basically the embracement of Bitcoin by TradFi. I looked at a graphic the other day, and it just caught my attention. Basically, the amount of Bitcoin being bought by institutions is significantly more than the amount of Bitcoin being mined, right? So eventually, push comes to shove, right? Eventually something, gives, and we finally get, that price action. But I mean, look, consolidating at 100K for over a year, I think that in and of itself is bullish. I think a lot of people had expectations for this year because of the 4-year cycle theory. And, the year after the halving tends to be the most parabolic year. Clearly, that didn't pan out this year. I see people calling for, okay, look, we hit the top. It was 126K. Now we're heading into a bear market. I don't see that. And, and you always hear the meme, right? This time is different. But the reason I don't see that is because, again, the amount of institutional demand on Monday, you had Michael Saylor announce an $800 million Bitcoin price at an average he bought at an average of 102K per coin, right? So again, like even if we do head into a bear market in 2026, which I don't foresee happening. I mean, this is the midterm year. The Republicans have to perform well to keep the House. This is the first pro-Bitcoin president. And the reality is when he was inaugurated, the price was 109,000. The price, I'm 11 months older. I have a 2-year, my daughter was a year old. Now she's 2 years old. And the price is at $93,000 effing dollars. So are you telling me that the first pro Bitcoin candidate who owns the 6th largest Bitcoin treasury company, you have Howard Lutnick in the White House, you have RFK Jr., you have all these people, and you're telling me that somehow, bro, we're going to fall down to 30K or 40K or 50K in 2026? Is it a possibility? Yes. But I think we've already broken the 4-year cycle. The 4-year cycle is already broken. The 4-year cycle is 3 green, 1 red. Right now, as of today, it's 2 green, 1 red. 2026 yet to be determined. So that's how I'm feeling. I'm bullish because of you guys, and then I'm bullish because of what's happened in the back end.
I like that. Peter, anything to add on this? Because this really plays into exactly what you were just saying about the Trump admin and generally just the vibes going into the midterm elections next year. Like these things do matter. Politicians like to keep people happy. One of the ways to do that is by making monetary conditions looser. Hey, sending out free stimmy checks, whatever it might be. Where are you at with this? I assume you're in the same boat as Nico.
I agree. And this is where I think what we've seen is a rotation from the halving being the key catalyst, which might have been really the liquidity cycle, to Bitcoin really, the cycle's now being determined by the political framework. And I look at this and think there is an election that Trump has to win. His number one financial agenda is Bitcoin. If he is to win that election next year, he needs to have the economy absolutely ripping on fire somewhere between March to August next year. So he runs into the midterms with a whole host of backing and support. It's really critical for him to maintain his agenda and push that forward, because if he gets rolled in the midterms, then all of his agendas get put to the sideline. He probably gets impeached. We can basically give up on Bitcoin being regulated in a I guess, in a supportive framework, because there'll be opposition to that. So I look at this and think that is a far bigger influence on what's going to happen over the next 12 months than the halving cycle. And one thing that really doesn't make sense to me right now when it comes to the effect of miners and versus the price action is we have had just an exponential growth in hash rate on the network over the last, say, 3 years. But we haven't seen the price really keep up with that. And I look at this and think, are we in the process of watching a whole host of miners go out of business? But it feels like a lot of the miners have had their AI pivot. They've rolled to AI. They've got all the infrastructure to support that. But if that's the case, where is the hash rate coming from? And so at some point in time, either the hash rate's going to have to fall significantly and those miners go out of business, or we're going to have to see price catch up to it. So I just look at this as an extended cycle and agree with Nico in part that we're seeing the politicization of the Bitcoin cycle now, which is far more important than the halving cycle. So next year, I'm really positive on.
It is a really interesting point about hash rate and this miner rotation into AI. You've seen this narrative shift quite a bit recently. I think Iron is one who that wasn't really a narrative shift for them. I think from the beginning, they were pretty vocal about they were providing the future of Bitcoin mining and AI compute. Like I'm pretty sure from the first time I heard them on sponsoring Peter McCormack's podcast, like a few years ago, that was still part of their mission. But you've seen a lot of these other miners start to pivot. And it is fascinating though, because it's like, well, if that's the case and more of that, compute power, obviously they're, the key force here is the energy that they have access to, right? Like how much energy they have access to. But if they're pivoting more and more of that to AI compute, where does this other hash rate come from? I mean, Nico, where are you at with this? Do you think this is a situation where we might have, is a nation state like Russia doing some stealth mining? Is it something like that? Like, are there way bigger forces at play than people want to admit?
So that's a really interesting question. So I just got back from Mining Disrupt in Dallas, Texas, and just got to talk to some industry insiders from the mining industry. And the way they pitched it to me, it's not even a pitch, but the way they described it to me was basically like, Nico, you have to understand that miners are the pioneers for AI. Why? Because they built out the infrastructure that now the AI revolution is taking advantage of. So without the miners, a lot of this AI infrastructure, which is extremely expensive, by the way, it's significantly easier and cheaper to build out a Bitcoin mining facility rather than an HPC, so an AI facility, right? Significantly cheaper. But the core infrastructure is the same, right? So you need that core infrastructure to be built out in the first place, which is a large capital investment up front. And this is really where the Bitcoin miners are pioneering, because they're going to these stranded energy sources all around the world. And it's like, they just go in there and they're like, okay, we'll build it out. We'll build out the infrastructure necessary. And what you're seeing is a lot of them are saying, hey, you know what? We can pivot to AI. We can pivot to HPC. If it's more profitable, but it's really the Bitcoin miners that were the pioneers for this AI revolution that we're basically in the early innings of. So any country, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, that's serious about AI can use Bitcoin mining as a catalyst to basically catch up, right? So it's a very, very kind of interesting perspective that I heard at Mining Disrupt, but it goes hand in hand. It all really, orbits around this idea of energy usage, right? Before AI, before Bitcoin mining, I would say that, energy usage was very inefficient. I would say that there was no other, buyer of last resort. The fact that there's a buyer of last resort for electricity is an absolute game changer. If you're a grid operator, or if you're a country that's hell bent on rolling out these renewable energy sources without the need for government subsidy, you know what could actually make that economically feasible? Bitcoin mining. Right. And of course, this goes hand in hand with AI, because what a lot of these Bitcoin miners are realizing, like a lot of the publicly traded ones, they're realizing, hey, wait a second. We have the infrastructure in place already. We know that all these, AI providers are just requiring a tremendous amount of computing power. Hey, Let's be best friends. But if it wasn't for Bitcoin, that infrastructure wouldn't have been built. In fact, the United States of America right now would be playing catch up to China. The China mining ban was a blessing in disguise for the United States because it allowed the rollout of this Bitcoin mining infrastructure that's now being used for AI.
I think that is such a fundamentally important point that maybe it's because China, quote, banned Bitcoin so many times that it was kind of, the boy who cried, ban Bitcoin. But they gave the U.S. it was a huge boon, right? This was, I think it will be looked back when the history books write about this, or when the AI historians are summarizing this for you, they will look back and they will say, what a cataclysmic geopolitical blunder by China to do this. Because where did all that hash rate go? Well, a lot of it went to Texas. It went to some other places, like not in the U.S., but a lot of it came over here in the U.S. And that has allowed, you saw a ton of FUD around Texas's ERCOT grid over the past few years, especially as these Bitcoin miners were really kind of ramping up. You saw this in the last cycle. Some of the really big ones, whether, like Riot or Mara, whatever they were, and many others. But then now you've seen that Texas grid become one of the most resilient because of what Bitcoin mining has been able to do, because of that flexible demand response, because of the stabilization that Bitcoin can provide, as you said, being that buyer of last resort, so that when you overproduce, you don't have to just run that into the ground like the UK is currently doing, curtailing, I don't know how many billions of dollars worth of electricity per year, because turns out, they don't have the demand for it when it's producing peak, and they don't have enough of it when it's not producing peak, when it's in the troughs. And so it seems that there's that old saying, and maybe it's not even that old, but I know Alex Gladstein has said it many times. If you're not mining Bitcoin, you're wasting energy, and there are no poor energy rich countries, or there are no poor countries that use a lot of energy. If you use a lot of energy, you're a rich country, and if you're not mining Bitcoin, you're wasting energy. So put the two of those together, and it's like, if you want to be a globally dominant power, you need to be using a lot of energy and mining Bitcoin. And that's a virtuous cycle. That's just a, flywheel gets thrown around too much these days, but it feels like a flywheel of sorts. Peter, where are you at with this? We talked a lot earlier just about sort of the game theory around El Salvador and what the U.S. may or may not be doing to kind of back them and tell the IMF to kind of get out of here. You see a country like El Salvador also that is, looking at doing a lot of Bitcoin mining and expanding that. You've seen a lot of countries, smaller countries, sort of use this to their advantage. Kingdom of Bhutan, we talked about earlier. That's one that's been very public about it now. Do you think we start to see a bit of a shift in the global power dynamics because a country that starts adopting Bitcoin just as a way to build out more meaningful energy infrastructure, it seems to give them a massive advantage, and they can leapfrog from being a, quote, developing country to being a developed country simply by harnessing more energy? Bitcoin is a way to do that, to actually pay for that build out as you do it. Is this something you're tracking? Where are you at with this?
I look at, I guess, first principles of the electricity market first, and I look at, we're basically only consuming globally in the US, but basically it's a pretty good indication of the rest of the globe. Maybe 40% of produced electricity gets consumed, and there's no economical way to store that other 60%. And it's not like pouring water into a dam and you just stop it when you don't need it and then you unplug it and it comes out. Once you lose electricity, you can't get it back. So it just goes to ground, it gets wasted. This is where what Bitcoin offers, I think, is the way to monetize that 60% energy that's just totally wasted. I look at, from a geopolitical sense, the monetization of Bitcoin, and as Bitcoin becomes bigger and bigger, plays a much bigger role in geopolitics. The ability for countries to be self-sufficient is going to be enormous. The US has got so much gas, you guys don't know what to do with it. Saudi Arabia doesn't even monetize the gas that comes out of the ground there because it's just too hard. If they had miners they could plug in and monetize it in some way, shape or form, that'd be really good for them. It also, rather than seeing, methane and whatever else it is go straight into the air, they could monetize it and reduce carbon emissions. I look at how the monetization of the mining network could benefit, Russia. They had 2 of their pipelines blown up, and now they've got to build a third pipeline to a totally different market. If they were able to monetize Bitcoin in the truest sense, they could be completely self-sovereign. They wouldn't have to export any oil or gas. They could ship all that gas to effectively their Bitcoin miners and process that. So I look at this and think this is a way of Bitcoin mining is a way of making the world really self-sufficient in its own terms and providing long-term peace, because you will be able to generate your own income from that. Now, what needs to happen to facilitate that is the price of Bitcoin needs to go through the roof, so it's actually economical for these countries to do it on this larger scale. But as we discussed previously, I think all of this is happening. It will happen. It's probably going to take the next 10 to 20 years to really fulfill that promise.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see. And I think that this goes back to something I just talked with Jeff Booth yesterday. And so I'm feeling very bullish on humanity and on free markets and on the power of deflationary technology, because that's the thing. Like, we should be living in a much more abundant time than we are. And granted, it is a pretty abundant time, all things considered, for a lot of the world, not for all of the world, right? But for a lot of the world. And the thing that we've had, which is a getting close to capitalism, right? We haven't, truly had a real free market for any length of time, as Jeff would tell you, because we haven't had a free market in money, because the money has been centrally controlled by a cabal of central bankers who weren't elected and operate, for their own interests. But it's going to be incredible to see what humanity can do when we are untethered, no pun intended, but untethered from the shackles of this fiat system, which creates perverse incentives in all markets, right? It's not just that it creates perverse incentives in some, it creates them in all, and in energy markets as well. And you see this with the build out. It's not to say wind and solar are bad, but the over build out of each of them, where you don't have anything to do with that energy, that is bad. And that's why you have all the curtailment in places like the UK that the taxpayer pays for, while they still have record high energy prices. And so I'm curious too, Nico, we started this off just saying why we're kind of incredibly bullish right now, and so I want to switch gears a little bit here and just talk about, you're somebody, you have a daily Bitcoin show, you broadcast live every day about this, you talk about Bitcoin as much as anyone can, right? And everyone is better for it. I'm glad that you do this. We need more Bitcoin broadcasting at all times. What I worry about right now is that so many of our fellow plebs who have an opportunity right now, and I'm not saying Bitcoin may not go lower, maybe we touch 58K. It's a magnet. I'd love to see it. I'd love to stack those cheap sats. But what do you say to the people who are out there right now who are saying, maybe I should wait for it to go lower? Peter says he's always advising his clients, like, look, once you're ready to buy Bitcoin, do it right now and go in whatever size you're comfortable with. Because this feels like one of those times where we're going to look back 5 years from now and say, wow, what an opportunity that was in November of 2025. What a generational opportunity. Man, I should have gone harder. I should have stacked harder. What's kind of your message to those folks who may be listening right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone pays the price of tuition, right? Like, I don't think I've met someone who just hasn't paid that cost. And it's a temporary, loss of purchasing power and fiat, but you shouldn't be denominating your wealth in fiat. You should be denominating your wealth in Bitcoin. But yes, I mean, it's a rite of passage. I mean, even the greats of Michael Saylor and Nayib Bukele, like, they were down on their initial Bitcoin investment, and then, they paid their price of tuition. They stuck it out. They didn't sell. And then eventually, their investment went up, right? And then they looked like geniuses. But they essentially did exactly what the rest of us did, which was buy Bitcoin, get ridiculed by your friends and family for the first 1 or 2 years. And then, if you hold long enough, eventually you're vindicated, right? And I think the world is kind of going through this process right now. So my piece of advice for anyone is like, look, like, buy Bitcoin. It's not a get rich quick scheme. Hold it for at least a cycle. You're going to think it's a really good idea. And then hold it for 2 cycles, and you're going to be relatively wealthy compared to, your peers around you, because you've been saving and earning in Bitcoin. And then by the time your 3rd cycle comes around, I don't know, I haven't been there yet, I'll let you know, but I'm assuming it just gets better. And just based on like the OGs that I've seen, they've reached this point of like Bitcoin Zen, like where they like, and I remember I was, I don't want to name any names, but I was having cigars. I really want a cigar right now. I just smoked my last cigar. It's such a pity. But after this, I guess I'll get another cigar. But I was smoking cigars with some Bitcoin OGs at the Canadian Bitcoin conference. We were like at a bar in Montreal, and it was pretty cool. And I remember I just brought up the price. I'm like, price action this year, man. Like, it just kind of, like, I don't know what's going on. And these are people that have been in Bitcoin since like 2013, right? Like 2012, like one of them was mining Bitcoin with his computer, right? Like, just to kind of give you an idea of when these guys got in. And they like looked at me with like a dead, like, serious, like there is no, comedy or any type of sarcasm in their voice. They just look at me, they're like, I don't know what the price is right now. Like, they didn't care. They didn't care. And what I've noticed with people that have been in Bitcoin for longer and longer is their beards get longer and their level of I don't care increases dramatically. It just goes parabolic. Like, I couldn't grow facial hair when I started Simply, right? I can grow facial hair now. Look at Jack Dorsey. Like, it's, this.
Strong beard.
And I'm telling you, like, in one cycle, Michael Saylor will have a beard. Like, it's just going to happen. Like, he's going to try to shave it, and it's just going to grow out the next day, right? But in all seriousness, like, there's something about, saving and earning in Bitcoin that you reach a level of peace in your life that is extremely hard to describe to someone that is still in the fiat matrix. They're still in the rat race. And it's, you can describe it to them. You can send them the Bitcoin podcast. You can send them Rocksum. You can send them Simply Bitcoin, and you could show people the door. But at the end of the day, they have to open the door, and they have to be prepared for that initial, like, yeah, you might have bought the top. Look, I remember when I bought the top 2017, I bought the top at 20K. And I felt like a moron. Like, I was like, I'm so dumb. But then I bought the bottom at 3,500, and then I bought at 10K. And now, like, I'm thinking about it now. Like, me and Opti literally talk about this. Like, we just shoot the shit before the show every day. And we're like, dude, like, could you remember, like, when when $100 bought you 1,000,000 sats? Like, that was fantastic. I remember that. Like, it was so nice. Now you need $1,000 to buy you 1,000,000 sats. Like, so again, like, it's hard to really describe this to someone that perhaps hasn't taken the orange pill yet or opened the door or crossed the bridge. But in 5 years, this might seem expensive, but you're going to be like, dude, like, I had an opportunity to buy this at 100K. Like, you're going to say that. Like, it's inevitable, once, like, Bitcoin, Bitcoin's a teenager, right? Teenagers go through phases, and Bitcoin's going through the stablecoin phase, and it's fine. It goes, you get it out of your system very quickly, and then Bitcoin becomes an adult, and it finds itself again, and then number go up starts happening, right? But, I think my advice to anybody, to weave it back in is, like, look, like, buy Bitcoin. Don't buy it because you think you're going to get rich. Buy it because it's just better money and your life is going to be better for it. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen the next day. You're changing your and this is like the biggest mind F of them all, right? It's just, you're changing your operating system. You're changing your unit of account, and people underestimate how much of an importance money plays in their life. Like, everyone's like, oh, don't talk about money, it's ugly, and like, don't talk about whatever. Bitcoiners, we can't help but to talk about money every effing day. So I think that saying comes from, don't talk about fiat money because it's ugly. I think people inherently know. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, man, like, take the orange pill, life gets better. You don't need to feel broker the next day. There's a reason you can't afford anything. It's not your fault you're just using the wrong money. Last thing I'll say is to allude to your handle, Walker, is the American dream isn't dead. You're just using the wrong unit of account. And in fact, the American dream is not dead. The American dream has just been exported worldwide via Bitcoin.
I say amen to all of that. Peter, I know, and Nico, there's a few things there I want to follow up on. Peter, I know you've got to run here. Anything you want to leave folks with before I read you out here?
I would just like to leave people with the notion of learn as much as you can. The more you know, the more you'll buy. And a message of gratitude for what you do, Nico, all of the work you do as well. Two of the best in the space at spreading and educating newbie Bitcoiners and even OG Bitcoiners. So I'd just like to say thank you. Please keep what you're doing. Once people understand this, they just go all in. And I feel privileged to be on the same team as you guys and getting to chat about that. And thanks for all you do.
No, and right back at you, Peter. Thank you so much for joining here. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. We're going to come back. We're going to make you even more bullish after this, talk about everything else that's going on. Peter Dunworth, thank you so much for joining us here today. Guys, don't touch that dial. We will be right back. See you soon.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the centre of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're travelling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxum, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxum, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to Roxham TV, everyone. My name is Walker America. I am here with Nico Moran. He is the founder and one of the hosts of Simply Bitcoin. We are talking about reasons that we are bullish, given everything that is going on here. And Nico, again, it seems strange to me, and I think people will look back and be kicking themselves for it. It seems strange to me that right now, amidst incredible news about Bitcoin medium of exchange adoption, with what Jack Dorsey has recently done with Square and Cash App, opening up Bitcoin acceptance to 4 million plus merchants, using Bitcoin as rails within Cash App. All of this, that's not even to say anything about the, let's call it store of value adoption, which is Michael Saylor buying another 8,000 plus Bitcoin over $800 million. El Salvador making a massive smash buy of over 1,000 Bitcoin. They're maybe their largest ever, I'm not sure, but certainly it looks like a hockey stick on that chart going up. It's just crazy to me that people are seemingly like the vibes are bad, Nico. The vibes are just bad right now. And I don't know what it takes. Like, does it just take more NGU for people to realize, hey, look, nothing with Bitcoin has changed. This is the thing that I never understand with people. There's not bearish news about Bitcoin anymore. There's no vulnerabilities. There's no issues that are actually inherent to Bitcoin that have changed the fundamental thesis. And yet people, it's like if the news just, if the price isn't responding, they somehow view like, oh, well, I guess it's over. I guess we're cooked. The gold bugs are dancing. The fiat economists are dancing. What are people missing right now?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think, we're monkey brained, bro. Like I don't know how else to describe it. And I'm guilty of this as well. Right. Like, when the price goes down, people inherently are like, oh my God, this is never going to end. And when the price goes up, people are like, oh my God, buy, because this is going to go up forever. It's like this very human thing that, I think it's just part of the human experience. I think very few people have been able to master this, emotion of doing the exact opposite of what your intuition and your body is telling you to do. And I think, especially Walker, you and I, content creators, you have to literally come up with Bitcoin content every day, which is extremely difficult, which means that you're very tied in to the vibes, right? If you're not tied into the vibes, your content's just gonna not do well, right? So you have to be tied into the vibes, and the vibes right now are like, we might be heading into a bear market, right? And that's just kind of, the reality of making content in the Bitcoin space. But again, and maybe this is my copium, and maybe this is like my way of saying, okay, we're not just going to spend another year kind of going sideways, and I'm going to have to pull out my hair and all that stuff. But I think this time, man, markets tend to do the exact opposite of what everyone is thinking. And what everyone expected in 2025 was for Bitcoin to go up forever. That was the expectation. Bitcoin is going to blow off top Q4 of 2025, October, moon never, or this, I don't even know the memes, right? But it was a given. If you looked on X, it was a given that all of this was going to happen. And I remember in the beginning of the year, that was one of my main concerns. I was like, dude, that's not how it works. The majority of people don't get it right. That's not how these things work, right? So and I kind of posted this half-heartedly, but the post did pretty well. And I basically said something along the lines of look, Wall Street is following all the analysts and influencers, and they're just counter trading them, and they're making a fortune. Because, there's probably half a dozen or a dozen very well followed quote unquote analysts in the space. And basically everyone was saying the same thing. So could you imagine if you were on the other opposite side of that trade, Wall Street, we know Wall Street's involved now. We know TradFi is involved now. And like, are you telling me that they're not like, you know, like, okay, all right, you think it's going to go up, do you? Right? And then what I think also is happening this year, Walker, that I think contributes to the vibes, right, is I think that some very powerful and influential people are doing whatever it takes to shake you out of your bags. And they're doing that via boredom, which is an emotion that like none of us have ever experienced. Like I've been in this industry for a decade. I've never been as bored from a price action perspective. From a news perspective, this year has been the best year in my entire career. But from a price action perspective, this has been the most boring year I've ever endured. And I've endured 70% drawdowns, 80% drawdowns, 60% drawdowns. But the thing is, at least you felt alive when you were dying, right? You were dying slowly, but at least you felt alive. Like at least you felt like, oh my God, it's going lower. I thought it couldn't go lower. This is terrible. The sentiment was bad. And this cycle, it's not like that at all. It's this like grinding sideways action that just bores you to death. Like you don't like, you're just like, wow. Like, and then, and it was really interesting because every single time that Bitcoin made an all-time high, I knew that it was going to get shot down the next day. Like we hit 124K, we went back down. We hit 125K, we went back down. We hit 126K, we went back down. It's almost as if, I don't know for sure, this is speculation, but it's almost as if, they're trying to shake you out of your bags. Like, I think that could be it. Like, I think it's Wall Street wants cheap Bitcoin. I think the Trumps want cheap Bitcoin. I think a lot of people want cheap Bitcoin. And what better way to get people out of their Bitcoin bags when they get bored? They see, you know what it's like? You know what it's going to be like this Thanksgiving? This is going to be the first Thanksgiving you're going to have with your family that, your grandpapa is going to look at you like from across the table and he's going to look at you, oh, you got that fancy Bitcoin? Well, my S&P index fund outperformed you by 10%, motherfucker. And then you're going to look at them like, you'll be like, and then your other uncle from across the table, who's a gold bug, is going to look at you like, oh, so that Bitcoin? Well, 60% mother effer. Ha ha ha. And you're going to look at him like, I don't know. Right. So yeah, man, like it's strange times, but I think they're trying to shake you out of your bags. That's my opinion.
Dude, it is actually, it is going to be an interesting Thanksgiving, right? Like your boomer Uncle Jim or whatever, who's been wrong about everything the whole time, is now finally going to get to be like, I told you so, like how's it? And that's the funny thing is that's like literally just describes every Bitcoin critic is like Bitcoin rips their faces off and they've been wrong about Bitcoin for years. And, in many cases, right, with a lot of these boomers, that whether they be gold bugs or fiat economists, they've been wrong about Bitcoin for years. They've watched Bitcoin just absolutely destroy whatever their particular asset of choice is, in most cases, gold or whatever it might be. But it doesn't matter because just pick any asset and Bitcoin's destroyed it. But then Bitcoin takes a little breather or is a little boring, and they are just coming out of the woodwork to be like, I told you so. Remember when I told you Bitcoin was going to crash at $3,000? Well, look at that. It just crashed to 90,000. So I guess I'm right. And it's like, okay, man, like don't buy any then. Like
right.
more for me. Like, I don't know, Nico, it feels like we're at this point where, because I kind of feel what you're saying about like, maybe it's Wall Street trying to do some shaking out of the bags. Like obviously players who are coming in size want to get Bitcoin as inexpensively as they can, right? And anybody who has spent a meaningful amount of time studying this, which now a lot of Wall Street has. For a while, it wasn't the case, right? They were ignoring it, whatever. But Larry Fink comes in and he says, yeah, you should pay attention to this. And everybody's like, oh shit, I guess we should. And now they've looked at it and they've said, wait a minute, like you're telling me there's only 21 million of these? You're telling me that 95% of them are already in circulation? There's only gonna be 5% left until 2140, like long after I'm dead, like that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with absolute mathematically enforced scarcity. Holy shit. We need to do everything we can to accumulate as much of this as possible. And you see, there are players out there who are doing this, big Wall Street names. Cantor Fitzgerald as one of them, like both personally and as a company, they're doing this. They're coming in size because they know what they own. They want to, maybe, not saying Cantor specifically. I don't want to get, sued for any sort of defamation here or libel. I always get those two mixed up, which one is in print and which one is spoken. I digress. Any player like this would naturally want to make you forget the power of the thing that you own. Make you forget that, look, what we just said a moment ago, nothing has changed in terms of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is still Bitcoin. There will only ever be 21 million. They're going to keep printing fiat. Every fiat currency will continue to debase, will continue to inflate. Trump is bragging about sending out stimmy checks. They're talking about 50-year mortgages. The fiat world is kind of in shambles. And you have this life raft. You have this lighthouse. You have whatever analogy you want to use for what Bitcoin is. It's a light in the darkness. It's something, it's a return to actual money. And you have a chance to get a piece of this. And it's like, man, I wanted to shout it from the mountaintops that, like, guys, you have a chance right now and you're going to kick yourself for not taking it later. I'm not saying Bitcoin's not going to go lower. I don't know. I'm not a male astrologist, AKA technical analyst, right? Like, I'm not looking at the charts. I just know what I own. And I know that when we look back, like we look back now at the COVID crash that you were talking about, and it's like, oh my God, can you believe you could buy a full Bitcoin for $3,600 or whatever it got down to? Dude. Like, if in the benefit of hindsight, you'd be like, I would have become a paraplegic. I would have sold my arms, my legs, my kidneys, my liver, everything that I want to, like, I would have sold it all, right? All of the chairs. Why do I still have so many chairs? Damn it.
Yeah, why do we have chairs, bro?
We don't even need them. But like,
bro, we could have got like a quarter Bitcoin, bro, for the chairs. I don't know what we were doing.
Like, fuck, but you're going to look back on this time with that same sort of, oh shit, I didn't realize what an opportunity that was. And, and maybe you do, and it is what it is, right? But if you're listening to this right now, and you somehow have some dry powder left, or you have both of your kidneys, which is like more power to you, like you've got a chance right now because there is no stopping this thing. It's the Bitcoin is not getting any less powerful. Bitcoin they're not creating any more of it. They're going to keep printing fiat. They're going to keep debasing the currency. Nothing stops this train. Lyndon Alden's fiscal dominance thesis is the best economic meme of this decade. They can't stop doing what they're doing. All you can do is save yourself, save your family by saving in the only thing they can't manipulate. Yeah. And you have a chance to do that for what, 30% cheaper than you could a couple weeks ago? What a lucky day. It's not even Christmas yet, guys, and you're getting a present. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Just, get rid of that other kidney and you'll thank yourself later. Don't actually get rid of your kidneys, guys. Please. Organ harvesting, illegal organ harvesting is not an industry you want to get messed up in. But, create value. Go out there and do something, maybe save a little extra money where you can. Save some extra fiat and spend it to acquire cheap sats at a discount. Like, that's all I can say. Like, you got an opportunity. Take it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it beautifully. Also, forgive me, my child unplugged the Ethernet cord. But yeah, look, the train has left the station, but you still have the opportunity to jump on the caboose. And for anyone who doesn't know what the caboose is, it's like the last car of the train, right? So like in the Indiana Jones movies, you can like get on a horse and you can jump on the caboose. But the train is moving, right? And Walker and I know a lot about trains, okay? We share that commonality. We have experience with trains, long train rides. Walker and I have done a lot of due diligence on this.
It sounds bad if you keep saying trains in that way. We're talking about real trains, people.
We're talking about trains, like actual trains. Like if your mind was going to that place,
please don't let it. Yeah. No.
You're
Real
very,
trains.
very, very, very naughty.
Good train rides with good beers through beautiful countrysides. Lovely.
You're not making it better.
Oh shit. Okay. All right. Continue. Okay. Let's leave that where it is. Leave it where it is, Nico.
Real trains like caboose, like choo choo. You know.
Yes.
But yeah, look, the train has left the station. It's moving, but you still have an opportunity to jump on the train, right? But if you wait a year, 2 years, 3 years, you might not have that opportunity. And you could say, okay, Nico, but I could still buy Bitcoin. But look, $92,740 is more money than the average person has, right? Like Bitcoin is already out of reach for most human beings on planet Earth, right? If you have the privilege and the luck, because at the end of the day, it also comes down to luck, depending where you're born, right? To live in the developed world where, you make a salary and whatnot, if you have enough discipline, I think that you still have the opportunity to be a whole coiner. I think we've reached peak whole coiners. I don't think there'll ever be more whole coiners today than there is in ever of Bitcoin's history. Because once the price goes to $500,000 per coin or $1 million per coin, it's just not going to happen. You're not going to get yourself Bitcoin. Most people are just not going to get themselves a Bitcoin, right? So, that's like kind of the thing that I want people to digest is you still have this opportunity. Maybe the train is moving fast. It is a fast moving train. But if you are disciplined and you run fast enough, and if you're in the right situation, you might still have the opportunity to become a whole coiner. And if you're a whole coiner, just to kind of give you guys a stat, there's 65 million millionaires all around planet Earth. There's only 21 million Bitcoin, and estimated 3 million Bitcoin are lost. If you divide the amount of Bitcoin by the amount of millionaires, there's not enough Bitcoin for every single millionaire on planet Earth to buy one. There's not enough. There's literally not enough Bitcoin for that. Every millionaire would have to buy like 0.3 or something like that. It's like a very small. It's not a whole coin. So if you want to be part of this like new financial elite, for lack of a better expression, the train is moving, and you have the opportunity to jump on. And I don't think that opportunity is going to exist 5 years from now. And American Hodl's been he was before my time, but he's been telling you guys about this meme for like, half a decade now. 6.15 Eternal Riches and Big Tip podcast, right? So yeah, man. I mean, that's what I got to say about that, dude. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. Are people really gonna capitalize on it?
This is ultimately the question, right? Is like, are you going to take this into your own hands? Because you're going to be able to buy Bitcoin. Like, I think that you still have a long time where you're still going to be able to exchange those infinitely printable fiat dollars for Bitcoin, right? The question is just how good of a deal you get. And right now, you happen to be able to get a really good deal. You happen to be able to get a fantastic deal. Like Bitcoin's on sale, and whenever it dips is kind of a meme, but like it's true. Like these dips are meant for buying. Like I really do not think, again, not a technical analyst, not some expert in that regard, but with everything going on right now, with the fact that we know, like, let's talk about what we know. We know that nation states are accumulating Bitcoin. You may say that's only small nation states. And it's like, yeah, small forward-thinking nation states for now are the only ones accumulating Bitcoin. The rest are just confiscating it. You think that's going to stay that way forever? No. Companies are acquiring Bitcoin. Oh, it's only a few companies. It's just crazy guys like Michael Saylor and Strategy and some of these Bitcoin treasury companies. For now, until everybody realizes that in order to keep their head above water as a corporation, they need to have Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Oh, it's just a few, just a small number of people that are buying Bitcoin. Yeah, for now. Because you still have an asymmetric advantage. There's still an information asymmetry here because most of the world is still asleep to this. because they're still too busy watching whatever garbage reality TV they're watching. They're too busy with all the bread and circuses that this fiat world puts out there to keep you asleep and to keep you from paying attention to the thing that actually has the most potential to change your life, which is Bitcoin, which is a money that they can't fuck with. And man, like if you're listening to this right now, you are one of a privileged few that are paying attention at this moment in time. More people will continue to pay attention. This will be the water that we swim in, the air that we breathe one day. We're not even close to that yet. We're still in the very early stages. When our kids, so we've got kids, about the same age, when they are grown, when they're our ages, the world's going to look completely different. And I have a feeling you're going to know, whose parents or grandparents were stacking sats back in November of 2025. Like you're going to have an idea, because those people are going to be economically hyper advantaged. And that's just the reality of it. Like life's not fair. This isn't fair. Not everybody knows about Bitcoin. That's not fair, but Bitcoin itself is fair. The rules are fair. That's what matters. And if you're here, like, man, take the bull by the horns, because it's going to start bucking. And let's see what happens. But, Nico, we're running up at the end of time here. Anything you want to leave folks with? I just want to tell people to check out your show, Simply Bitcoin, if they haven't already. It is a daily show where you expound on your bullishness and take down all of the bullshit narratives that the fiat world throws out there. If they haven't checked it out, they absolutely should. Get in that live chat too. Always a good time. Anything you want to leave folks with before we close out here?
Yeah, I mean, look, like we're talking about price, we're talking about adoption, and I think that's like the theme of this year, right? Is, you have traditional finance coming into Bitcoin, sovereign wealth funds, the acceptance by the administration. But at the end of the day, we have to remember that Bitcoin is a revolution of individuals, and we really have two futures ahead of us. We have a future of Bitcoin, peace, prosperity, opportunity, or we have a future of slavery, right? Which is central bank digital currencies. There will be no in between. They're trying to get rid of Crash, and they're doing it a lot faster than people than people are noticing. I cover this every single day, so I've seen all the steps they've taken throughout the years. I wouldn't be surprised if cash wasn't a thing 10 years from now. And you're going to have a choice between a central bank digital currency and Bitcoin. And to think that the government won't weaponize a CBDC against you if you wrong think or wrong speak, you're putting your head in the sand. So my last message is Bitcoin or slavery. You got to decide what future you want to live in.
I say amen to that. And that is a perfect note to end on. And again, you know what? Think about you 5 years from now. Like what I always... Carl and I always joke about this. My lovely wife, we always say, like future you thanks you. Like present you may be stressed. Present you may be like, shit, like, where am I going to find more dry powder? How am I going to do this? Future you is going to thank you. And the future offspring that you have will thank you. That is the beauty of Bitcoin, that it allows us to think about long-term into the future, allows us to think about our kids, allows us to actually have a fighting chance in this world that is insistent on trying to steal the value of our time and energy. But, Nico, speaking of time and energy, I appreciate you for sharing your scarce time and sharing your energy here with us today. This has been a blast. We got to do it again sometime very soon. You always bring the best kind of energy. I thought I couldn't get more bullish, but I am now, Nico. Thank you, everybody who joined in the live stream. Again, this has been Roxham TV. I am Walker America. Thank you, guys. And remember, when everybody else is bearish, it's usually a pretty good sign to be bullish. So stack sats while you can, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Nico.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, Come on, little buddy. Bitcoin. I need you. Don't go.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the centre of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're travelling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxum, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxum, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?